Late at night, a group of terrified teenagers ran through the forest, hounds relentlessly pursuing them. Suddenly, there was a crash. They stopped abruptly, realizing their youngest member, Junki, was missing. Looking back, they saw he had fallen into a ditch. The boy wearing the number 11 jersey wanted to go back for him, but number 7 protested. If they wasted time on Junki and the mad dogs caught up, what then? And the mad dogs weren't actually dogs, but the men chasing them. Just then, a whistle pierced the air, sending shivers down their spines. The 2 oldest boys took off running, leaving the smallest one frozen in fear. Number 11 urged him to run, to survive, and then jumped down into the ditch to rescue Junki. He just reached Junki when the hounds arrived. He quickly covered Junki's mouth. The mad dogs slowly approached. The 2 boys held their breath, their hands trembling uncontrollably. Their fear of the mad dogs was palpable. The dogs sniffed around for a moment, then ran off in another direction. But number 11 didn't dare relax. He figured they'd caught his scent. Quickly, he grabbed some mud and smeared it on both their faces. Just as he finished, the dogs returned. The 2 boys held their breath, terrified. Finding nothing, the mad dogs, seemingly losing patience, whistled for the hounds and left. The 3 who had run weren't so lucky. One of them stepped in an animal trap. The other 2 ran to the road to flag down a car, but they never could have imagined it was a ride to hell. The driver was ruthless. He swerved the car directly at them. Number 24 died instantly. Number 7, though he dodged the initial impact, couldn't escape his fate. Meanwhile, the mad dog continued his search. Suddenly, he stopped at a wooden plank. His 2 henchmen dragged number 24's body back and, under his direction, threw it onto the plank. Number 11 and Junki hid underneath, the dead boys' blood dripping onto their faces. One trembled. The other was numb. The mad dog slowly walked by. Time passed, leading to a rainy night in 2022. A woman walked home alone. Suddenly, a strange sound came from behind her. Looking down the quiet, deserted street, fear gripped her heart. She tried to call her father, but before she could dial, footsteps approached from behind. She glanced back, threw her umbrella, and ran for her life, but it was all in vain. She was not meant to survive this night. When she awoke, she was hooded, tied to a chair. Terror consumed her as the familiar whistle and footsteps reappeared. Her fear reached its peak. A blurry figure stopped behind her. She wanted to ask why, but before she could speak, hands tightened around her throat. "Goodbye, world?" Her name was Jae-yoon. Today was January 5th, 2022, her birthday and the day of her death. Her father loved her very much. He had even dressed up as an angel to surprise her for her birthday. Unfortunately, he and his wife waited late into the night, but their daughter never came home. Her phone went unanswered. The heavy rain outside mirrored the growing unease in his heart. 10 days later, this unease turned into horrifying reality. An elderly woman noticed her dog sniffing at a garbage bag and went to shoo it away. But something struck her as odd. Why was there such a large garbage bag there? Driven by curiosity, she opened it. The sight almost made her faint. On January 15, 2022, Jae-yoon's body was discovered. The police immediately cordoned off the scene, unsure if the perpetrator had a vendetta against the victim. Murder was one thing, but why mutilate the mouth like that? Among the police was their most unusual detective, Sung Joon Nam, our protagonist. He tied himself up in a garbage bag and rolled down a hill, trying to replicate the killer's disposal method. Many considered him crazy, but in reality, he was a brilliant detective. The location where Jae-yoon's body was found was remote, with no surveillance cameras. It was indeed the perfect dumping ground. If it weren't for that dog, who knows when she would have been found. Another peculiarity, the bag was standing perfectly upright, not as if it had rolled down the hill. If the goal was simply to dispose of the body, why not use a more efficient method? Why go through the trouble of carrying it down and carefully positioning it? There had to be a reason. That evening, Sung Joon visited the morgue and saw Hae-jin's father weeping over his daughter's body. A pang of grief shot through him. He would catch this sick killer soon. The next day, he sought out Soo-young, a former classmate and the medical examiner. Jae-yoon's inner arms and knees were bruised, but there were no scratches. It was likely she had been tied to a smooth post. The cuts on her mouth were clean, precise. Hesitation marks were absent. Each cut was a single, decisive stroke. Each cut was 5 centimeters long, remarkably uniform, as if measured. They were shallow, only 5 millimeters deep. The perpetrator seemed intent on avoiding the cheekbones and arteries, minimizing bleeding. The murder weapon was likely a small, sharp blade, perhaps a scalpel. Jae-yoon was a 20-year-old university student who lived with her parents. Her last known appearance was on January 5th. That day, Jae-yoon went to a nightclub to celebrate her birthday with friends. Around 10 p.m., she left. She texted her father that she would be home late and to leave the door unlocked. The police tracked her signal and discovered she was very close to home at that point. Why send that message if she was practically at her doorstep? The next day, Sung-joon and his partner, Suk-gu, visited the location where Jae-yoon sent her last text. They discovered the camera there had been vandalized. Sung-joon instructed Suk-gu to check other cameras in the area for any leads. Just then, a delivery driver happened to pass by. Sung-joon rushed over to ask if he had seen Jae-yoon on the night of January 5th. However, too much time had passed, and the driver had no recollection. Next, the two detectives interviewed Jae-yoon's friends to learn more about the night of the incident. They learned that everyone was having a good time when a VIP guest, seemingly high on drugs, started harassing Jae-yoon, forcing her to drink. When she resisted, he pulled out a knife to intimidate her. Sung-joon immediately went to the nightclub. The same VIP guest was now harassing another girl named Yuna, forcing her to drink and threatening her with a knife when she refused. Sung-joon arrived just in time and kicked the man. Surprisingly, even after being caught red-handed, the man lashed out at Yuna in anger. This completely enraged Sung-joon, who proceeded to thoroughly beat the VIP guest. Later, at the police station, Sung-joon met Yoon-kai, Yuna's guardian. After a lecture from Sung-joon, Yoon-kai learned about Yuna's near assault at the nightclub. Yoon-kai followed Yuna outside, urging her to get her life on track. During their conversation, we learn about their relationship. Yoon-kai is a social worker, and Yuna had previously committed an offense, resulting in community service. Since then, Yoon-kai had been trying to help the stubborn high school student, but her sincerity seemed to have little effect on Yuna, who continued to do as she pleased. The VIP guest, now badly beaten, faced accusations related to Jae-yoon's murder. However, the police quickly found evidence of his alibi, forcing Sung-joon to release the despicable man. Arrogantly, the man boasted about his wealthy father and his uncle, a lawyer at a powerful firm, threatening to sue Sung-joon for assault. Sung-joon calmly replied, "My father's a judge." This shut the man up instantly. As he left, Sung-joon added, "My brother's a judge too, Judge Sung-hoon. He's known for upholding the law and following his conscience, uninfluenced by outside factors. That's his principle." That day, the former judge visited Sung-joon, who didn't even offer him tea, demonstrating his impartiality and cautious nature. The former judge got straight to the point, explaining that his first case as a lawyer involved Sung-hoon. His client was a medical student who had made a mistake and gotten involved with drugs. They hoped Sung-hoon would show leniency. If he refused, they would sue Sung-joon for the assault. Sung-hoon didn't even flinch, telling him to go ahead and sue. Everyone should face the consequences of their actions. If status and connections dictated outcomes, what was the point of the law? He finished by saying something that infuriated the former judge. "I'll be reporting the purpose of your visit today to the administrative office." Sung-joon's mistaken arrest and subsequent hospitalization of the VIP guest earned him a severe reprimand from his chief. But Sung-joon felt he had done nothing wrong. The man deserved it. His colleagues intervened, pulling the chief away and diffusing the situation. At that moment, Sung-joon received a call from his brother, summoning him home for dinner. Sung-joon tried to use the investigation as an excuse, but under Sung-hoon's insistence, he reluctantly agreed. Sung-joon was deeply apprehensive about his family. He hesitated several times on his way in and even before facing them. His father was a judge, his mother a nominee for Minister of Health and Welfare, and his older brother a rising judge, poised for promotion. In contrast, Sung-joon was the family underachiever. His parents were always proud of and reassured by the well-behaved, accomplished Sung-hoon. When the topic shifted to Sung-joon, it was always accompanied by worry. With his mother's confirmation hearing approaching, his father repeatedly warned him not to cause any trouble. After the awkward dinner, Sung Joon followed Sung Hoon to his home. Though Sung Hoon feigned indifference to his brother's assault charge, he was privately concerned. Back in school, Sung Joon was constantly fighting. He always feared his brother would kill someone one day. He was relieved when Sung Joon calmed down and expressed interest in becoming a police officer. This recent violent outburst, however, made him question Sung Joon's true motivations for joining the force. Sung Joon became lost in thought after hearing this. At Jae-yoon's father's house, the grieving man wept inconsolably. Sung Joon waited for him to calm down before approaching him with questions. He wanted to know if Jae-yoon had any enemies. Her father said even if she did, they were minor disagreements, nothing that would warrant such brutality. Sung Joon rephrased his question, asking if anyone close to Jae-yoon was skilled with small knives, like a medical student or a chef. Moon Kang, Jae-yoon's father, seemed to think of someone, but denied knowing anyone. The housekeeper mentioned someone named Young who fit the description, but Moon Kang quickly interrupted her. Sensing something was amiss, Sung Joon began investigating Moon Kang. He discovered Moon Kang was former Special Forces and now ran a food company. The company's address was near where the body was found. Sung Joon visited the company. Employees were portioning meat. At first glance, everything seemed to fit the profile. Sung Joon inquired about an employee named Young. This question caught the attention of someone in the back. The manager, however, denied having any employee by that name. Sung Joon pretended to have the wrong place and left. After the company closed, an employee surreptitiously called someone named Young, informing him about the police visit. Sung Joon, who had anticipated this, appeared and seized the phone, obtaining young man Chun's name and number. Meanwhile, the police found a witness who had captured a blurry image of the perpetrator. Sung Joon asked the employee to look at the picture, and he confirmed it was young man Chun. Sung Joon also discovered the company employed undocumented workers. Unbeknownst to them, their conversation was overheard. Following the employee's directions, Sung Joon arrived at Man Chun's hideout. He cautiously entered, gun drawn. Suddenly, Man Chun attacked him with a knife, cutting his hand. Paradoxically, the sight of blood seemed to invigorate Sung Joon, who quickly overpowered Man Chun. Realizing he was outmatched, Man Chun fled. Sung Joon pursued relentlessly, tackling him and using a water hose to choke him. He released his grip when Man Chun yielded. On January 18, 2022, 3 days after Jae-yoon's body was found, young Man Chun was arrested. 2 men in a car nearby watched the arrest. One of them was Moon Kang. During interrogation, Man Chun denied killing Jae-yoon. Coincidentally, the judge assigned to the case was Sung Hoon. Man Chun filed a request for a jury trial, seemingly hoping for leniency. Sung Hoon believed a jury wouldn't sympathize with a murderer. Despite not understanding the defendant's strategy, he granted the request. The jury members were quickly identified. One was the owner of the restaurant Sung Joon frequented. The other was Yoon Kai, who had a chance encounter with him once. Even a shaman was summoned, and all those selected, without exception, were targets of someone. On April 14, 2022, the first trial began. In court, Man Chun claimed he'd only brandished a knife to threaten. He hadn't wanted to kill anyone, but Moon Kang owed him 7 million won in unpaid wages. Not only did Moon Kang refuse to pay, but he also treated him with contempt. Moon Kang made his money exploiting illegal immigrants, which he shouldn't have been doing. Man Chun insisted he only intended to frighten Moon Kang's daughter to teach him a lesson. Mrs. Beek, Moon Kang's wife, cried out, "I took you in out of pity all those years ago, and you killed my daughter for a measly 7 million won." Moon Kang remained silent, glancing at the man behind him. The man immediately ushered Mrs. Beek away. At this point, each jury member felt differently. Man Chun had transformed from a hateful murderer into a pitiable victim of wage theft. Then, he added, "That night, there was someone else at the scene besides me. Jae-yoon was chased by me, and in her panic, she ran into a car. The driver was Sung Joon." Hearing this, Moon Kang's eyes snapped open in disbelief. He recalled that night years ago. It turned out he was the mad dog from back then, and the emotionless child was Sung Joon. Meanwhile, inside the police station, a young boy fidgeted anxiously. Just as he stood up, the police officer returned, bringing him a lot of food. He patiently listened to the boy recount the hellish days he endured at the welfare home. Expressing disbelief that such cruelty still existed in this day and age, he asked the boy to write down everything he'd experienced in detail. Soon after, while the boy was fast asleep, the officer promptly returned him to the welfare home. The boy never suspected that the police officer and the mad dog were in cahoots, and that this terrifying place had such a pleasant name, the Hope Welfare Institute, but it was truly a hopeless place. Back in the present, Man Chun recounted the night of the incident. He had disabled the surveillance cameras and waited. When Jai Yun passed by, he lunged at her. Just as he grabbed her, a car drove by, its headlights blinding him. Jai Yun took the opportunity to escape, and he could only watch helplessly as the two drove away. That was the last time he saw Jai Yun. Regarding the car, he only remembered it was a black SUV with a honeycomb grille. Such details were common, so people didn't quite believe him. Then, he dropped a bombshell. The person in the car was Sung Jun. Sung Hoon's heart pounded. He never expected his brother to suddenly transform from a police investigator into a suspect. The courtroom erupted in commotion. Immediately, the prosecutor summoned Sung Jun to the stand. The method of proving Sung Jun's innocence was peculiar. He didn't directly offer an alibi or dashcam footage. Instead, he emphasized that when he went to apprehend Man Chun was planning to escape by train and had violently resisted arrest with a knife. This, he argued, demonstrated a guilty conscience. After the murder, the video evidence wasn't provided by Sung Jun. His colleague obtained it from a passing delivery driver. The video was supposed to be automatically deleted, but coincidentally, the driver had an accident that day and kept the video. This was just one piece of evidence among many. Two other decisive pieces of evidence emerged. Man Chun's knife had Jai Yun's blood on it, and a woman who had lived with him had a severe injury at the corner of her mouth. After everyone saw the comparison photos provided by Sung Jun, initial horror gave way to a surge of outrage. Man Chun, sensing the shift in the courtroom, frantically denied Sung Jun's accusations, adamantly insisting that Sung Jun was Jai Yun's killer. He claimed the evidence was fabricated. During a court recess, Sung Jun visited him. Despite the unfavorable situation, Man Chun seemed unconcerned, uttering two cryptic statements, "Can't a police officer be a murderer?" and warning Sung Jun to watch his back. Meanwhile, the 9 jurors deliberated. Except for Yun Kai, the others quickly reviewed the files and concluded that Man Chun was guilty. Yun Kai disagreed. She felt Man Chun's denial of being the murderer was sincere. She argued that everyone was biased, assuming his guilt because he was an illegal immigrant, poor, just like Yun Kai had been as a child. Whenever classmates lost money, she, the poor fatherless child, was always the first suspect. Yun Kai's words silenced the room. They decided to re-examine the files carefully. Sung Hoon, too, was troubled by the case. Man Chun's accusations against Sung Jun kept echoing in his mind. Finally, the jury reached a verdict. Returning to the courtroom, they unanimously declared Man Chun guilty. Man Chun lost control, repeatedly demanding, "Why doesn't anyone believe me?" But his outburst only diminished respect for him. Even his lawyer gave up on him. Sung Hoon delivered the final sentence, life imprisonment, to the applause of the courtroom. Moon Kang remained impassive, seemingly detached from the proceedings. Suddenly, Man Chun made a desperate escape attempt, grabbing a pen from the table and stabbing his lawyer in the neck before lunging at Sung Hoon. Facing the blade inches from his face, Sung Hoon calmly pronounced the sentence one last time. Sung Jun rushed forward and subdued Man Chun. Just as everyone thought the ordeal was over, Man Chun declared that the judge and jury would pay for their actions. His chilling threat sent shivers down the spines of those present. Throughout the proceedings, only Moon Kang remained expressionless, seemingly lost in thought. Sung Jun's parents watched the news coverage. Upon seeing Moon Kang on television, Mrs. Na's demeanor suddenly changed. Though the trial was over, Sung Hoon couldn't relax. He voiced his doubts. Was Ju Ki really Sung Jun? This deeply disappointed Sung Jun. His own brother didn't trust him. Changing the subject, Sung Hoon said he had only one request of his brother, never to sit in the defendant's chair. Meanwhile, during his transport, Man Chun discreetly retrieved a piece of paper from near the jury box. The jurors took this opportunity to mingle and get acquainted. The eldest, Kang Young Kai, was the recently retired CEO of a company and the jury foreman. Then there was Bi Chul Ho, a TV producer, Yong In Sung, an office worker, Chef Lee, the restaurant owner, Choi Soon Gil, a taxi driver, Hai Jin, a popular blogger, Kyung Jo, the shaman, and finally, Yoon Kai, the social worker. Their cheerful atmosphere was quickly shattered. Juror number 5, T Ho, who had previously declined to participate, suddenly appeared. Seeing Hai Jin taking pictures, he snatched her phone, only calming down after confirming she was taking selfies and hadn't photographed him. He offered no apology for his actions, simply stating his dislike for photos and telling Hai Jin to be more careful. During the transfer, Man Chun spotted an approaching motorcycle whose rider glanced at him. Moments later, a traffic accident occurred. Man Chun, seemingly prepared, quickly removed his seatbelt and unlocked his handcuffs with a key he'd stashed on the floor. Police arrived swiftly at the scene. The driver's only recollection was the motorcycle rushing towards him. Everything after that was a blank. Sung Joon checked nearby security footage and followed Man Chun's escape route, finding a motorcycle mirror on the ground. Remembering Man Chun's courtroom threat, he immediately called Sung Hoon, urging him to ensure the jurors' safety. Man Chun didn't know their addresses, but Sung Joon was also a skilled fighter. Sung Hoon, on the other hand, was an easier target. Sung Hoon acknowledged the warning but went to his office to review Jae Yoon's case files. He noticed a corner torn from the juror address list. He recalled Man Chun tearing it during the courtroom chaos. Sung Hoon contacted a colleague for a complete list. Meanwhile, the police tracked Man Chun's location. He was headed towards Daejeon. Moon Kang was also monitoring the situation, unsure of Man Chun's target. Sung Hoon reprinted the juror information. 3 names were on the torn corner. Kai, who lived in Daejeon, was one of them. Sung Joon was searching for Man Chun's trail. Just as he left, Yoon Kai, after saying goodbye to driver Choi and Hai Jin, began walking home. The quiet, deserted alley had a parked motorcycle, a foreboding sign. Yoon Kai received a text from Sung Hoon. Man Chun escaped. Jurors, please be careful. Only mildly surprised, Yoon Kai didn't grasp the danger. Arriving home, she found her door unlocked but thought nothing of it and entered. Sung Hoon called to confirm her safe arrival, relieved when she answered. However, after hanging up, Yoon Kai sensed something amiss with the bathroom. She cautiously opened the door, finding nothing. Unaware, Man Chun was hiding nearby, waiting to take her hostage. The next day, the police arrived and surrounded Yoon Kai's residence. Their attempts to apprehend Man Chun were thwarted by his cunning. As everyone struggled for a solution, Sung Joon took a risk. While the negotiator spoke with Man Chun, he began scaling the building's exterior. He tried to get a clear shot but couldn't find a good angle. Man Chun issued a demand. Within an hour, the president had to overturn his conviction, or he'd help Yoon Kai reincarnate. Yoon Kai reminded him the police couldn't fulfill his demand. In a nation ruled by law, the president couldn't overrule a court decision, a fact Man Chun surely knew. His impossible demands clearly had an ulterior motive. Yoon Kai realized Man Chun never intended to release her, regretting her earlier concern for his supposed wrongful conviction. Her words gave him pause. Yoon Kai seized the opportunity, pushing him away and hiding in the bathroom. Her relief was short-lived as the glass shattered. Seeing the impending tragedy, Sung Joon jumped from the adjacent building. The locked door blocked his entry. Yoon Kai bit Man Chun and tried to escape but was dragged back. At the critical moment, Sung Joon broke the glass, shooting Man Chun in the shoulder. Believing him incapacitated, he moved to free Yoon Kai. Unexpectedly, Man Chun lunged, stabbing Sung Joon. He collapsed, his vision blurring. Police stormed the scene, rushing both to the hospital. Moon Kang, disguised as a doctor, created a diversion, allowing him access to Man Chun's room. Despite his arrogance, Man Chun was visibly shaken by Moon Kang's presence. Moon Kang, well-versed in Korean law, knew even a death sentence rarely resulted in execution, let alone a life sentence. He wanted revenge for his daughter, to personally finish off Man Chun. He pulled out a special drug ordered from overseas, one that caused a slow and painful death. This time, Man Chun was truly terrified and immediately confessed that he was just paid to do the job. The other party, who called himself Joon Ki, had instructed him to stage Jae Yoon's kidnapping. As for the rest, that person had other plans. Man Chun also had a recording of the call with him. When Moon Kang heard the name Jun Ki, it sounded familiar. He and his men exchanged glances, suddenly thinking of a terrifying possibility. At the same time, Sung Jun also remembered that incident from years ago, abruptly sitting up in his hospital bed. Hope Welfare, a place that should have brought hope to children, had become a place of despair. Forget basic necessities, even minimal respect and human rights were absent. In this environment, it was inevitable that some would try to escape. Number 11 was one of them. He'd struggled to reach the police station, only to be returned to the orphanage. Those who ran away were usually killed, but the mad dog had been in a good mood recently. His wife, infertile for 10 years, was finally pregnant, and he couldn't kill too many people, so he spared Number 11's life as a good deed. Number 11's escape attempt failed, but not completely. He had carefully observed the outside world and found a possible escape route. After hearing his plan, 4 others decided to follow it. Number 7 had a scar on the back of his hand. Back in the present, Sung Jun was injured in the line of duty. His family was extremely worried and wanted him to resign or transfer to an administrative position, anything to avoid frontline police work. But this wasn't why he became a police officer, so he pretended not to hear them. Yun Kai visited Sung Jun in the hospital, but since she wasn't a relative or a police officer, the nurse couldn't give her his room number. Luckily, she ran into Sung Hoon. Upon hearing they were brothers, she was quite surprised. They didn't look alike at all. Yun Kai finally reached Sung Jun's room. The previous incident had left her traumatized. Seeing the knife on the table triggered the terrible memory. Sung Jun noticed her distress and quickly put the knife away, advising her to seek therapy. After Yun Kai left, Sung Hoon returned to the room and told Sung Jun that Man Chun had torn up the jurors' information during the chaos at the courthouse. That's why he dared to threaten revenge, but they were thinking about it too simply. Man Chun's goal wasn't just revenge. Moon Kang was a step ahead. Not only did he know someone was behind Man Chun, but he also obtained a recording, guided by Man Chun, to avenge his daughter. Moon Kang arranged a meeting with the police officer who had returned Number 11 to the orphanage years ago, the current chief. Moon Kang asked the chief to help him find Jun Ki, the youngest of the 5 children who escaped. In the recording obtained from Man Chun, someone claimed to have given him a large sum of money, instructing him to act a part. This person also said they were framed for Yon's murder, and that they would personally eliminate Jai Yun. But the chief felt this wasn't enough. Concluding that the person was Jun Ki based on just a recording was too hasty. He implied he didn't want to get involved. Moon Kang then brought up the little girl from over 20 years ago, the one the chief had molested at the orphanage. With his weakness exposed, the chief had no choice but to comply. But the question was where to start, and Moon Kang wanted results, not the process. It had taken him 10 years of infertility to have a daughter, so Jai Yun was his most precious person. He asked the chief in return, "Who is the most precious person to you?" Meanwhile, a familiar whistling tune echoed at a kindergarten. A little boy was targeted. The chief rushed to the scene, but he was too late. His grandson, Min Ho, had vanished. Fortunately, it was just a warning. Min Ho hadn't been taken. He gave his grandfather a black bag, saying the Joker gave it to him. Inside were yogurt and bread, the same things the chief had given Number 11 years ago. At this point, the chief still couldn't reach his daughter. Hai Jin had told Min Ho that she had gone cherry picking. Elsewhere, Sung Hoon was still worried. Of the 3 jurors whose information was torn up, only Hai Jin remained unreachable. Could Man Chun's attack on Yun Kai have been a diversion, with Hai Jin as the real target? Yes, the night Yun Kai was attacked, Hai Jin was also in danger. Sung Hoon had called her, but unfortunately, she couldn't answer. She was knocked unconscious by the attacker and dragged away. While struggling, she dropped a fake nail on the ground. The attacker didn't kill her immediately, but instead imprisoned her. She was missing for 3 days. Sung Hoon was very worried. He called again, but there was still no answer. The chief was also frantically searching for his daughter and finally found Hai Jin. Sadly, she wasn't alive. Her death was identical to Jai Yun's, her mouth cut into a clownish grin. Mrs. Suk-hee, somehow learning the news, told Sung Jun about the chief's daughter. The chief, now experiencing the same pain Moon Kang had felt, was burying his own child. Hai Jin was a popular blogger. The last photo uploaded to her social media was of a dinner with the other jurors. Sung Joon immediately went to Soo Young to understand the situation. The bruises on her hands and legs and the cut on her mouth were the same as Jae-yoon's case. The cause of death was asphyxiation, with no signs of sexual assault. The only difference was that she was beaten before death. It appeared she had fiercely resisted, even losing a fake nail. This was puzzling. Why didn't the attacker use violence with Jae-yoon but did with Hae-jin? Was Hae-jin not as easy to subdue and had to be overcome with force? If Man-chun was Jae-yoon's killer, then who killed Hae-jin? After taking Yoon Kai hostage, Man-chun was taken to the hospital, seemingly without time to commit the crime. Hae-jin's time of death was between midnight and 2 am on the 15th. Man-chun was admitted to the hospital at 6 am on the 15th, so it seemed there was still a window of opportunity. Sung Joon immediately sought out Man-chun, but he seemed surprised upon hearing of Hae-jin's death. He claimed he didn't do it and had an alibi. He was with Yoon Kai the night of the murder. According to Yoon Kai's recollection, after dinner with the jurors, they left around 11 p.m. She, Hae-jin, Kang-ja, and In-sung got into driver Choi's car to go home. Afterward, she received a message from Sung Hoon at 11:42 p.m. She was subdued by Man-chun at 11:50 p.m. Man-chun stayed with her all night and didn't harm her. Yoon Kai's testimony cleared Man-chun as a suspect. The police began considering another possibility, a copycat crime. But someone who could replicate the murder so precisely must have had inside knowledge of the case. The prosecutor, the police, or the forensic team were all possibilities, but the jurors were the most likely suspects. Sung Joon started his investigation with Chef Lee, a skilled chef who used knives. He claimed he took his knives to bed with him at the restaurant and didn't go out. The security camera at the door could prove it. During the dinner, Mr. Kang and PDB kept staring at Hae-jin. When questioned, Mr. Kang said he returned home around 3 o'clock or 4 am. After the meal, he went to a bar with PDB. PDB didn't deny this, adding that Mr. Kang's behavior was so perverse he left early, around 1 am. In-sung also claimed he was with friends that night and provided their contact information to the police. None of these individuals seemed suspicious after questioning. However, when Sung Joon visited Kyung-ja, something strange happened. She took Sung Joon's business card and then began convulsing. Her gaze turned vacant, and she spoke in a strange voice, uttering incomprehensible words. "Brother, you probably don't know who I really am." Sung Joon was bewildered. Leaving her apartment, he encountered a frightened dog cowering on the ground. Images of being chased by dogs flashed through his mind. A call from Yoon Kai interrupted his disturbed thoughts. Recently traumatized, Yoon Kai had forgotten something crucial. The last person with Hae-jin was Driver Choi. That night, Driver Choi became enraged after being cut off by a motorcycle. He chased after the two people on the motorcycle, yelling, "Women dressed like that out this late deserve to be shot." The two women in the back seat were terrified. His gaze seemed shifty, and he kept looking at them strangely. Both women were worried for each other, wanting the other to be dropped off first. Finally, Yoon Kai agreed to let Driver Choi take her home first. Hearing this, Sung Joon immediately went to find Driver Choi and discovered a black raincoat in his trunk. The dashcam, as he claimed, was stolen, and Hae-jin didn't come home that night. She said she was going to the park to meet someone, so he dropped her off at the park and left. Sung Joon noticed a spider tattoo on his arm. Driver Choi said he got the tattoo when he was young, wanted to remove it, but found it too much trouble and gave up. Sung Hoon has also been following the case. He doesn't believe it's a copycat crime. The murderer of Jae-yoon and Hae-jin must be the same person. Man-chun insisted he didn't kill anyone, and even pointed to Sung Joon as the culprit. Sung Hoon was half convinced, and part of the reason he convicted Man-chun was to protect his younger brother. But now there's another victim. Things are getting worse. T-han, he has to find out if Man-chun's words are true. He told Man-chun that if he tells the truth, the previous verdict will be overturned. Man-chun seemed slightly moved by this and said he saw the murderer, but couldn't see their face clearly. As for why he pointed to Sung Joon, he truly couldn't say. Sung Hoon, if you want to know the truth, investigate it yourself. Sung Hoon didn't force him further. While Sung Joon was seemingly asleep, he secretly took his car keys, unaware that Sung Joon was only pretending. That expression and those eyes were truly frightening. Could he really have another side to him? Sung-hoon searched the car for clues and unexpectedly found an earring. He went to his office to check the case file and saw that it resembled Jan's earring. Furthermore, it was confirmed that Jan had lost an earring. Meanwhile, Sung-joon was playing with a light, his expression grim. Then, he took out a fingernail. Wasn't this Hae-jin's fingernail that fell off when she struggled? Why is it in his hands? The children in the orphanage have no hope. At an age when they should be attending school, they're forced to work hard. While their bodies are developing, they don't have enough to eat. The only way to change their lives is to escape, and the price is their own lives. A childhood that takes a lifetime to heal. Today, the grieving chief announced the death of his daughter to the media. The method of the murder was similar to Jae-yoon's, but Man-chun has a provisional alibi. This suggests a copycat crime. Meanwhile, Sung-joon continues his investigation. Among the jurors, no one has an alibi for the night of the incident. Now only 2 people remain: Driver Choi, the last person to see Hae-jin, and Tae-ho, who had a minor disagreement with her that night. After investigating, the police discovered that Driver Choi and Mun Kang served in the same unit. They are old acquaintances. At this time, Sung-hoon also arrives to assist with the case. On the night of Hae-jin's murder, he sent messages to the jurors, and only Hae-jin didn't reply. The time frame was between 11 p.m. and 1 a.m., coinciding with the time of death. By tracking everyone's location when they received the message, the suspect can be identified. Sung-hoon, without revealing the earring, secretly asked his brother where he was on the night of the incident. Sung-joon said he was in Daejeon searching for Man-chun. He then went to meet Mun Kang and noticed a tattoo on his arm similar to Driver Choi's. Mun Kang explained that he previously ran a security company, and the employees there all had the same tattoo. Driver Choi was also an employee at that company. At that moment, Mun Kang recalled the situation during Man-chun's trial. In reality, Driver Choi had secretly approached him with crucial information. He'd claimed to have seen a child at the Welfare Institute back then, but wasn't entirely certain. He promised to confirm it and inform Mun Kang about this recovered memory. Mun Kang, naturally, couldn't tell Sung-joon, simply stating that he hadn't been feeling well that day and hadn't paid attention to the jury members. Sung-joon caught the flaw in his story, saying he understood why Mun Kang didn't greet Driver Choi, but questioned why Driver Choi hadn't greeted Mun Kang. With matching tattoos, they should be close. Mun Kang hastily fabricated an excuse, claiming they hadn't seen each other in over 20 years and probably didn't recognize each other. He also mentioned remembering Driver Choi's drinking problem back then, and how he'd beat his wife when drunk, causing her to run away. From then on, Driver Choi's temperament changed drastically, becoming incredibly violent. Eventually, he resigned to search for his wife. During Hae-jin's funeral, the jurors were discussing who could have killed her. Jae-yoon's case had brought them together, and now Hae-jin's murder made them suspects. Judging by the police's attitude, it seemed the killer was among them. The atmosphere grew tense as they eyed each other suspiciously. Just then, Driver Choi noticed the nanny taking Min-ho to the restroom and followed them, pulling out a photo and asking if the nanny recognized the person. It seemed he was still searching for his wife, who had left 20 years ago. Despite the nanny saying she'd never seen her, he remained aggressive. If Yoon Kai hadn't arrived in time, who knows what would have happened. Yoon Kai also learned from the nanny that Driver Choi was searching for a woman. While he was away, the others discussed the possibility of him being the killer. Tae-ho wanted nothing to do with it, preferring to keep to himself. He didn't even say goodbye, simply leaving alone. PDB then pointed the finger at Tae-ho, claiming he was equally suspicious. He'd kept glancing at Hae-jin during the meal. Hearing this, Kyung-ja retorted that if glancing made someone suspicious, then PDB was the most suspect. Enraged, PDB stood up, ready to argue. Suddenly, the chief appeared. PDB seemed flustered, swallowing his words. It appeared he and the chief had some sort of connection. Still consumed by grief, the chief received a text message. He opened it to see an image of Hae-jin tied to a chair. She didn't know what she'd done wrong, pleading for forgiveness. The killer said the fault wasn't hers, but her father's. The message detailed the process of his daughter's death, rubbing salt into his wounds. The chief could barely breathe, returning to the funeral like a walking corpse. Just then, he noticed Sung-joon's necklace. It looked familiar. Thinking back, he remembered Jun Ki wearing a similar necklace years ago. Could the Jun Ki that Moon Kang was looking for be him? Was Sung Jun the one who killed both Jai Yun and Hai Jin? Later, Sung Jun ran into Yun Kai outside and offered her a ride home. Hai Jin's death weighed heavily on her conscience. That night, in the car, driver Choi kept glancing at them. If she had let Hai Jin out of the car first, perhaps things would have been different. Sung Jun told her that was the wrong way to think about it. Man Chun was in her house, using her to create an alibi. It didn't matter who got out first. Hai Jin was the target. The next day, the chief pulled Sung Jun's records but found no adoption papers. The birth certificate and household registration were all registered by Mr. Ryu himself. This raised his suspicions. Where did the necklace come from? He instructed his subordinate to investigate. During lunch, the subordinate asked Sung Jun where he bought the necklace. Sung Jun replied that it wasn't bought, but a gift from his older sister, who had passed away long ago. Receiving this information, the chief was shocked. Jun Ki's sister was Jun Chung, the girl he'd assaulted years ago. She was indeed dead, and the siblings had identical necklaces. On one side, Moon Kang visited a nursing home, searching for a nurse. She was a former employee of the Welfare Institute, believed to be the last to leave before its closure. Moon Kang hoped to find Jun Ki through her. The nurse appeared terrified of him and reluctant to recall the events of that year. But Moon Kang's daughter was dead, and he was determined to avenge her. He pressed the nurse to reconsider, warning that he would continue to pursue her. Overwhelmed with fear, the nurse fled. Just then, the chief called, revealing that Sung Jun was Jun Ki. However, before they could reach Sung Jun, Man Chun acted first. He arranged a private meeting with Sung Jun on the rooftop. Upon meeting, Man Chun immediately fell to his knees, begging Sung Jun to save him. He explained that he had a 7-year-old son recently diagnosed with a brain tumor. The surgery costs were astronomical, far beyond his lifetime earnings. Even selling his organs wouldn't be enough. At his most desperate, a stranger contacted him, offering a deal: take the fall for a murder in exchange for the money. His wife would also have to make a corresponding sacrifice. It was the only way to save his son's life. The kidnapping of Yun Kai was also orchestrated by this stranger. Initially, he had only intended to try, but the stranger not only killed a private individual, but also the chief's daughter. Furthermore, Moon Kang had approached him, and he had given Moon Kang a recording. Although he was coerced, in hindsight, this stranger was even more terrifying than Moon Kang. If the stranger knew the recording was with Moon Kang, his son would surely be killed. In truth, the recording given to Moon Kang was a copy. If Sung Jun could guarantee his son's safety, he would hand over the original. This posed no risk to Sung Jun. If anything happened, protecting the witness was his responsibility. Meanwhile, Sung Hoon coincidentally arrived at the hospital. Just as he entered, he heard screams outside. He turned to see Man Chun had fallen to his death. A figure appeared on the rooftop. He rushed up, but he was too late, finding only a police officer lying on the ground. The officer recounted that Sung Jun had requested a private conversation with Man Chun and asked him to leave. Uneasy, the officer returned about 10 minutes later to check. While he couldn't hear their conversation, the atmosphere seemed tense. Seeing him return, Sung Jun ended the conversation, said goodbye, and left. As the officer was about to finish his coffee and take Man Chun back inside, he was suddenly knocked unconscious. Sung Hoon, the first to arrive on the rooftop, was also questioned. He stated he saw a figure but couldn't identify who it was. The police then asked, "Didn't you see Sung Jun there?" This further cemented Sung Hoon's suspicion of his brother. Sung Jun had come at Man Chun's request. So what was Sung Hoon's purpose there? It turned out that driver Choi had approached him for a private conversation, confessing to a personal connection with Moon Kang. By the rules, he shouldn't be a juror. He attempted to blackmail Sung Hoon for his silence. But Sung Hoon was not easily intimidated. He told Choi to go public. If needed, he could provide contact information for some reporter friends. Afterward, he sought out Man Chun to confirm whether Sung Jun was the murderer. He couldn't reveal this to the police, however, so he lied, claiming he came to encourage Man Chun to file for a retrial. Now, Sung Jun was the prime suspect. His colleagues tried to reach him but couldn't get through. Simultaneously, Man Chun's wife and child were targeted by the killer. The police tracked Sung Jun's phone to a motel, but upon entering, they were shocked to find Man Chun's wife dead and Sung Jun holding a knife. Staring down the barrel of a gun, Sung Jun knew he couldn't explain himself. To prove his innocence, he chose to run. As soon as he got into his car, he was kidnapped. Meanwhile, after learning that Sung Jun was indeed Jun Ki from all those years ago, the chief declared him a murderer and was determined to apprehend him. He also dispatched officers to Sung Jun's parents' house to gather evidence. This surprised his parents greatly. The jury members were also busy, discussing Man Chun's death and Sung Jun being wanted by the police. Sung Hoon went to his brother's apartment to investigate. The two brothers lived together, separate from their parents. He couldn't understand why the police would search their parents' house for evidence. Just then, his parents arrived, urging him to find Sung Jun, figure out what happened, and formulate a plan. However, Sung Hoon didn't know where his brother frequented or who he was close to. However, that wasn't the main issue. The issue was his curiosity. Did his parents truly not anticipate this day would come? At the same time, Sung Jun woke up to the sound of whistling. His kidnappers were Moon Kang's men. Moon Kang recognized the necklace around Sung Jun's neck, further solidifying his belief that he was Jun Ki. He said if Sung Jun wanted revenge for what happened years ago, he should have come after him. Why kill his daughter? Sung Jun looked bewildered, seemingly not understanding what Moon Kang was saying. But Moon Kang didn't need him to understand. All he needed was his life. Seeing the knife inches away, Sung Jun immediately fought back, knocking them down and escaping. However, he quickly reached a cliff edge, surrounded by Moon Kang's men. This situation reminded Sung Jun of the past. This time, he wouldn't be prey. With that, he jumped off the cliff, tumbling down the mountainside and landing unconscious at the bottom, covered in injuries. Sung Jun successfully escaped, making his way, wounded, to a payphone. News of him being wanted was exploding. Even his family's photos were being publicized. Yoon Kai saw Mr. Ryu and remembered their encounter 10 years ago. She had met him once before when she was falsely accused of theft and bullied by her peers. She had retaliated in a similar manner but ended up being sued. She was defiant and disrespectful. Exasperated, Mr. Ryu told her to apologize, but she would rather go to juvenile detention than lower her head. Unexpectedly, Mr. Ryu clarified that he wasn't talking to her, but to her accuser. This confused her. He had no connection to her, so why defend her? Did he have an ulterior motive? She had no money, no background, only her body. Did he want to take advantage of her? Seeing her thoughts, Mr. Ryu was speechless. He simply wanted to uphold justice and clear her name. Yoon Kai hadn't expected such kindness still existed. Fate was truly a wondrous thing. Mr. Ryu had saved her once before, and now Sung Jun had saved her again. She didn't know how to repay such kindness. At the payphone, Sung Jun was about to call the police when he remembered he was a wanted man. Cornered, he called Yoon Kai for help. Without hesitation, Yoon Kai agreed. She drove to the payphone's location. Just as she helped Sung Jun into the car, Moon Kang's men arrived. Moon Kang approached the car, checking the front seats but finding no one. He saw someone in the back seat and raised his knife, opening the door. However, it was Yoon Kai, not Sung Jun, pretending to be a drunk passenger waiting for her ride. Moon Kang, unsuspecting, left the car to continue his search. They had cleared this hurdle, but another problem arose with his family. Miss Na was facing backlash because of Sung Jun. Netizens demanded she not be appointed Minister of Health and Welfare. The pressure on Sung Hoon was also immense. The public criticized him for imprisoning an innocent man to protect his brother, staging protests demanding his resignation. Finally, under public pressure, the higher-ups decided to suspend Sung Hoon. Someone even impersonated Man Chun, sending Sung Hoon a knife with a note. "You're a murderer, convicting innocent people." Sung Jun's escape infuriated not only Moon Kang, but also the chief. He ordered Moon Kang to stay out of it, warning that his interference would only worsen the situation. He promised to inform Moon Kang if Sung Jun reappeared. After the chief left, Moon Kang and his men analyzed Sung Jun's escape route, suspecting he might have hitched a ride. Moon Kang suddenly recalled the car with Yun Kai's Children's Welfare Institute logo. Meanwhile, Yun Kai was diligently caring for Sung Jun. The jurors had gathered at Chef Lee's restaurant. If Yun Kai was suspected of gathering intelligence, then everyone else was equally suspicious. Most suspicious was In Young, who shared a surname with Jun Ki. Suddenly, Kung Cha muttered something, recalling a glimpse into Sung Jun's childhood memories, where he saw the boy trembling in fear before a large dog. The public was intensely focused on Sung Jun's case. The pressure on the police was palpable. Security footage placed Sung Jun at the scenes of both Man Chun and his wife's murders when they occurred. He was considered the prime suspect. They even suspected him of killing Ray, his colleague. Sung Jun was tormented, wanting to speak but lacking evidence to clear his name. He had become a target. After tying Sung Jun up for the night, Yun Kai finally decided to trust him and untied him. He then borrowed her phone to check the news. His expression changed dramatically. He was shocked to learn that Man Chun's son was also dead. He immediately called Suk-gu to confirm, learning the child had suffocated. At that moment, Officer Kang arrived and snatched Suk-gu's phone. Faced with questioning, Suk-gu lied, claiming it was his new girlfriend. Suspicious, Officer Kang called back. Yun Kai answered, allaying his suspicions. On the other end of the line, Sung Jun's face was grim. He distinctly remembered Man Chun's son being alive. As he left the motel, Detective Kang and his partner discreetly followed. Sung Hoon wanted to see if Sung Jun would contact his brother. Sung Hoon went to see Si Young to borrow the autopsy report related to the murder case. On the murder weapon, Sung Jun's fingerprints were found. His hair was also found on the clothes of the suffocated child. Although much of the evidence pointed to Sung Jun, this was also the most suspicious aspect. Sung Jun, no matter how foolish, had been in this line of work for many years and was perfectly capable of committing the perfect crime. He wouldn't leave so many obvious clues. At the scene of Man Chun's murder, a button with Sung Jun's fingerprints was also found. Sung Hoon was struck by this button. He remembered Sung Jun mentioning that a button on his shirt was about to fall off. He then went to the rooftop, where Man Chun met his demise, and pictured Sung Jun murdering him. During a struggle, Sung Jun's button came off. That evening, Sung Jun slept restlessly, dreaming of being chased by hounds and someone. A frightening whistle echoed in his dream. He mumbled in his sleep, "Go away, run quickly." Yun Kai, by his side, felt heartbroken, wondering what this man had been through. At that moment, Yun Kai received a call informing her that Yuna hadn't been to school for several days. Yuna was even more impulsive than Yun Kai had been at that age. She was out every night, unaware that she was being followed by driver Choi. Previously, Yuna had ridden on someone's motorcycle during a race, nearly causing an accident for the rider. He wanted to find her to settle the score. Just as Yuna was about to get into a car, Yun Kai rushed over to stop her. She earnestly persuaded Yuna to return to her studies. But Yuna was unappreciative and brushed her off. Discouraged, Yun Kai offered one last plea. She said, "The scariest thing isn't getting expelled, but being helpless with no one to help you." Unfortunately, Yuna ultimately chose to let go of Yun Kai's hand. Just then, Sung Jun woke up. He was puzzled by his strange dream. Moreover, he clearly didn't recognize Moon Kang, yet Moon Kang insisted he had murdered Man Chun's entire family. He tried to recall the name Moon Kang had mentioned. Could someone be impersonating him and committing murders? At that moment, Moon Kang arrived with his men. Fortunately, Sung Jun spotted them and escaped in time. Just as they began their search, Yun Kai returned. Moon Kang recognized her instantly. He pulled a knife, threatening her to let him inside to search. Sung Jun hid nearby, ready to intervene. Yun Kai immediately grabbed her phone, threatening to call the police. Moon Kang's subordinates also signaled that no one was inside. Moon Kang was no longer the ruthless killer he once was. He figured it was better to avoid further trouble. So, he led his men away. Later, Yun Kai learned from Sung Jun that Moon Kang was Ri's father. She finally understood why he was after Sung Jun. Sung Jun realized the danger wasn't over. Not wanting to involve Yun Kai, he decided to leave. But Yun Kai couldn't bear to let him go like that. Furthermore, he was a wanted man, and he didn't know who to turn to for help. In reality, he was only his parents' adopted son. Because he had always caused trouble, his adoptive parents deeply regretted taking him in. They didn't dare abandon him for fear of damaging their reputation. His brother only cared about law and justice. If he knew where Sung Joon was, he would definitely inform the police. Yoon Kai encouraged Sung Joon to try trusting his brother for once. After all, there were very few people who could help him prove his innocence now. After much hesitation, he wrote a letter asking Yoon Kai to deliver it to Sung Hoon, arranging a meeting at 7 p.m. As Yoon Kai feared, Sung Hoon turned the letter over to the police and collaborated with them to set up an ambush. Fortunately, his fellow officers trusted him. One pretended to drop his phone, another accidentally honked his horn, creating opportunities for him to escape. During the pursuit, they intentionally let him go. Sung Joon dragged his weary body back. Although he'd anticipated this outcome, he still found it hard to accept. Just then, Yoon Kai returned, accompanied by Sung Hoon. It turned out that when Sung Hoon handed the letter to the police, he had also given Yoon Kai another one, asking for her cooperation. He had also lured Moon Kang's men away, facilitating Sung Joon's escape. Sung Hoon showed him the case file and asked for an explanation. Sung Joon admitted the button was his, but he didn't know when it had come off, nor could he explain his fingerprints on the murder weapon. He could only insist that he hadn't killed anyone. That day, Man Chun had arranged to meet him on the rooftop. Man Chun said he only took money for jobs and gave Sung Joon the address of the motel where his wife and child were staying, claiming the recording file was hidden there. However, when Sung Joon arrived, Man Chun's wife was already dead. He also found Man Chun's son in the bathtub. Just as Sung Joon rescued the child, Detective Kang burst in. He tried to explain, but Kang didn't give him a chance and opened fire. Forced to flee, he was then kidnapped and brutally tortured by Moon Kang upon leaving the motel. He showed his wounds as proof. A flicker of compassion crossed Sung Hoon's eyes. He promised to help clear Sung Joon's name on the condition that all subsequent actions be reported to him. After his brother left, Sung Joon looked at the case file, lost in thought. The next day, Mrs. Na was furious that her political career was being jeopardized by her adopted son. Yet, in front of the media, she presented the image of a good mother, emphasizing that Sung Joon had recently saved Yoon Kai from attackers. She expressed her willingness to trust her son and saw no reason to withdraw her candidacy while the matter remained unresolved. That evening, Sung Hoon brought his brother some clothes, car keys, cash, and a phone for communication. They then began analyzing the case details. The only remaining lead was the recording held by Moon Kang. The brothers split up. Sung Hoon lured Moon Kang out while Sung Joon went to his house to search for the recording. Sung Joon didn't find the recording but managed to escape. Looking at the missing recording and considering his wife's erratic behavior, Moon Kang smashed his birthday cake. Tragically, as his wife tried to stop him, she hit her head on the corner of a table, bleeding profusely. Looking at his dead wife, Moon Kang nearly lost his mind. He put her body in the refrigerator and focused all his rage on Sung Joon. However, the recording wasn't with Sung Joon. The real killer had already taken it. That lead was completely dead. The only option left was to investigate Man Chun's murder. Sung Hoon discovered a drone on the rooftop, which might have captured the real killer. He decided to investigate the drone. Meanwhile, driver Choi continued to stalk Yuna. He picked her up, drunk, outside a nightclub and drove her straight into the woods. Wearing a raincoat and a black hood, he restrained and dragged her out of the car. Yuna seized a moment of inattention to call Yoon Kai for help. Before she could finish, driver Choi snatched the phone away. Yoon Kai immediately called the police. Fortunately, Yuna was still alive and taken to the hospital. However, she had drunk too much and couldn't remember what the driver looked like, only recalling a spider tattoo on his arm. At this time, Moon Kang approached driver Choi, revealing that Sung Joon was actually Joon Ki. Driver Choi was surprised. The child he saw in court wasn't Joon Ki, but number 7, the child with the burn on his hand. Driver Choi then called number 7, warning him that Mad Dog was looking for him. If he didn't want to be found, he'd have to pay for driver Choi's silence. Upon seeing the tattoo, Sung Joon recognized it as belonging to driver Choi. Choi had a history of domestic violence. With his twisted personality, he was likely to target women walking alone at night. Yuna's injuries were somewhat similar to Hai Jin's. Yuna also mentioned a wound on the attacker's hand, leading Sung Joon to hypothesize that Hai Jin had inflicted it. If driver Choi's DNA was found on Hai Jin's body, it would prove he was the killer. In fact, before being framed, Sung Joon had found Hai Jin's fingernails and given them to Si Young. But so much had happened since then that he hadn't retrieved the results. The next day, he secretly met Si Young to inquire about the forensic analysis. He learned that an unidentified person's DNA had been found on the fingernails. This, at least, could prove Sung Joon wasn't the killer. Unfortunately, Detective Kang had already taken the report and given it to the chief. Upon seeing the report, the chief ordered Kang not to tell anyone. He was also deeply disturbed. Could it be that the person who killed his daughter wasn't Joon Ki? Meanwhile, the oblivious Sung Joon, wearing a helmet to conceal his face, met with Suk-gu. He obtained a report from Suk-gu, revealing that Detective Kang had given the DNA report to the chief but hadn't made it public. Furious, Sung Joon returned home and started reviewing documents. It was a report on the phone signal locations of the jury members at the time of Hai Jin's murder. He discovered that only driver Choi had been with Hai Jin at that time, solidifying his conviction that Choi was the killer. Meanwhile, Detective Kang, whose daughter was getting married, invited the jury members to distribute wedding invitations. In-sung arrived quite late. Except for the deceased Hai Jin, only driver Choi and T-ho were absent. Sung Joon snuck into driver Choi's house, intending to steal his toothbrush for a DNA comparison. Upon entering, he found Choi lying on the floor, apparently attacked. Just then, Choi's phone rang. Sung Joon answered. The caller, Wai-song, wanted to know why Choi hadn't shown up for their meeting. Sung Joon didn't dare answer. Suddenly, the police arrived. Seeing the situation, he fled. The police entered and found driver Choi, thankfully still alive. Sung Joon returned and informed Sung Hoon of the events. Sung Hoon angrily reprimanded his brother for his reckless, self-serving actions, which put others at risk. Sung Joon argued back, saying that Detective Kang had hidden the forensic report and his colleagues refused to investigate. He was the only one who could clear his own name. He also told Sung Hoon that driver Choi was the only person present in the park when Hai Jin was murdered. He had only wanted to get the toothbrush for a DNA test, but things had gone awry. In the urgency of the moment, he hadn't checked if anyone else was in the room. However, he had taken Choi's phone, which contained a recording. It turned out that driver Choi had anticipated this and activated the recording function before number 7 arrived. Their conversation had been recorded. Driver Choi recognized number 7 in court by his hateful glare at Moon Kang and the scar on the back of his hand. Furthermore, number 7's actions seemed to be revenge for number 24's death years ago. In the recording, driver Choi mocked number 7's hypocrisy, revealing that it was number 7 who had snitched, leading to number 24's death. After his tirade, driver Choi was knocked unconscious. The brothers began recalling their positions in the courtroom. Driver Choi had been seated high up, able to see the backs of most people's hands. Eliminating the elderly and women, the pool of suspects was still large, but they now had a general direction. The killer was one of the people present in the courtroom that day. The brothers listened carefully to the recording, noticing something peculiar about the killer's footsteps. One heavy, one light, as if one leg were injured. Sung Joon recalled that among the jurors, T-ho fit this description. But without further evidence pointing to T-ho, he could only remain in hiding to avoid arrest, leaving the matter to Sung Hoon. As Sung Hoon left, he pointedly told Yoon Kai not to trust anyone easily, including himself and Sung Joon. His words made Yoon Kai ponder. Were they a sincere warning or something more? Exhausted, she lay down on the table to rest. Sung Joon woke up, thinking she was asleep, covered her with a blanket, and left. Meanwhile, Sung Hoon arrived at T-ho's house. The door was open, but no one was home. There was a photo of T-ho and his mother. Sung Hoon continued searching for clues, unaware of the approaching danger. Moon Kang had also sent men to capture T-ho. Outnumbered, Sung Hoon was caught. Just as they were leaving, they encountered Sung Joon. Fortunately, Sung Joon hadn't stayed put. Otherwise, Sung Hoon might have been seriously hurt. However, in the ensuing chaos, Sung Hoon was slashed on the arm. Seeing his brother injured, Sung Joon went to buy medicine. But when he returned, Sung Hoon was gone. Sung Hoon treated his wound himself. Looking at the scars on his body, it was clear he was no stranger to danger. Suk-gu had sent driver Choi's DNA for analysis. The results matched the DNA found under Hai-jin's fingernails. At the same time, Tae-ho unexpectedly turned himself in to the police, confessing to attacking driver Choi. Strangely, he confessed to the attack but offered no motive. When the police told him that Choi was still alive, Tae-ho became agitated, seemingly unable to accept this. The chief suspected Tae-ho and Joon-ki were working together, but the situation wasn't that simple. Sung Joon had noticed something at the end of the recording. After number 7 left, someone else had arrived and hit driver Choi with a bottle. This was the actual fatal blow. At that moment, Sung Hoon stood before driver Choi's hospital bed. He'd heard the same thing on the recording and wanted to ask who had come afterward. Driver Choi mumbled a few words. Then, he looked at Sung Hoon, his eyes suddenly filled with terror, and died in that state of fear. Just then, Moon Kang also arrived at the hospital, coincidentally encountering Sung Hoon as he was about to leave. Initially, he paid no attention, but upon seeing that driver Choi was dead, he sensed something was amiss. He immediately rushed to Mrs. Na, demanding she hand over Joon-ki. Mrs. Na finally revealed her true colors, speaking without any courtesy, even calling Moon Kang trash and unworthy of speaking to her. Moon Kang then threatened to harm Sung Joon if she didn't release Joon-ki. At that very moment, Mr. Ryu returned. They hastily ended their conversation. Seeing her husband's curious gaze, Mrs. Na lied and said it was a reporter. Sung Joon went to Soo-young to review driver Choi's autopsy report. The report confirmed that he had been attacked twice, with a time lapse between the first and second attack, rather than being hit continuously. He returned to analyze the situation. Besides number 7 and driver Choi, there was a third person involved. Who could it be? Sung Hoon suddenly mentioned number 13, saying that driver Choi had told him. Upon hearing this, Sung Joon's expression changed subtly, a shift that Yoon Kai noticed. Under her questioning, he revealed that he had amnesia due to an accident. He could only vaguely recall his number and name from his time at the orphanage, number 13, Joon-ki. But he wasn't the one who attacked driver Choi. Meanwhile, the police chief determined that there was another person involved in driver Choi's murder and ordered Tae-ho's release. However, as soon as Tae-ho left the police station, he was captured by Moon Kang's men. Tae-ho was brutally beaten, but refused to divulge anything about Joon-ki from back then. He had been tricked by Moon Kang once before, betraying his friends. This time, he absolutely wouldn't betray anyone again. Enraged, Moon Kang ordered his men to bury Tae-ho alive. Unexpectedly, the next day when he went to check, he found the hole dug up and Tae-ho gone. Today was Mr. Kang's daughter's wedding. The jurors received invitations. Yoon Kai saw Tae-ho and immediately gave chase. Unfortunately, she lost him outside the hotel. Just then, Sung Joon happened to call. He knew that Tae-ho was number 7 and wanted to find him to ask about the past. But he found no one at home, only a blood-stained invitation. He didn't know what was going on, but Tae-ho's presence there was certainly not to offer congratulations. He told Yoon Kai to be careful and said he would be there immediately. Today, Kyung-ja was mentally unstable. Last night, she had a strange dream. Several children begged her for help. When she woke up, she discovered the bowl of water she was drinking was filled with blood, like an omen of a bloody incident. All these signs pointed to something going wrong at the wedding. Sure enough, when Mr. Kang took the stage to give a speech, he collapsed after drinking the celebratory wine, poisoned. Sung Joon, a self-proclaimed knight-errant, arrived just in time. He spotted Tae-ho and immediately pursued him, but lost him in the parking lot. At the same time, a waiter came to inform the bride, only to be terrified by the scene before her. Following the screams, Sung Joon arrived to find the bride dead. The scene resembled the first two victims. The corners of her mouth were slit. Why did this father and son become targets? Surprisingly, Sung Hoon is frantically washing blood off his hands. Meanwhile, the police quickly secured the scene, checked the surveillance cameras, and discovered that Tae-ho had entered the bride's room. Therefore, he is currently the prime suspect. Sung Joon recalls the situation. After Mr. Kang collapsed, Tae-ho left. Sung Joon chased him to the parking lot but lost track of him. At that time, he saw someone who looked a lot like Sung Hoon. Sung Hoon vehemently denied it, saying he was never there. Sung Joon reconsidered and realized it made sense. Someone who wouldn't even attend a class reunion wouldn't likely attend a wedding where he knew no one. Suspicion against Tae-ho in this case is heavy. The top priority is to find him. On Tae-ho's wall is a picture of a mother and child. They immediately began investigating them. However, they aren't Tae-ho's wife and child. He happened to save the pregnant mother in a car accident, which left him with a limp. Not only that, but Tae-ho also built a shelter to help single mothers with nowhere to go. He's a good person, nothing like a murderer. At this moment, Sung Joon is inadvertently triggered by the sight of children playing. He seems to have been in an accident at a playground, making him sensitive to such scenes. A day of investigation with no results leaves Sung Hoon understandably discouraged. The next day is Yoon-ah's discharge date. As Yoon-kai helps her pack, she receives a call from Suk-gu informing her that Detective Kang has found Sung Joon's location and is on his way to arrest him. Before he could escape, Yoon-ah secretly followed Yoon-kai. She pulls out her phone and threatens to report the fugitive for the reward money. Sung Hoon's appearance changes her mind. She demands to join their escape. The next step is to devise a plan. When the police arrive, Sung Hoon pretends to be tutoring Yoon-ah. Yoon-kai stands beside them. Although Sung Joon escapes undetected, Detective Kang remains suspicious, only temporarily retreating. With the crisis averted, everyone disperses. Yoon-ah, having nowhere to go, trails after Sung Hoon. At this point, Sung Hoon suddenly receives a message announcing the start of a survival game. The Save Me event has a 24-hour deadline. He is startled by it. Simultaneously, Yoon-kai receives the same message, but her deadline is 21 hours. Unlike Sung Hoon, she dismisses it as an advertisement and deletes it. The jurors gather to discuss Mr. Kang's daughter's murder. PDB seems to know something, mentioning that the 3 murdered girls are connected. But when questioned, he feigns ignorance, claiming he knows nothing. At this moment, everyone receives the advertisement message again. The deadline is now 20 hours. Sung Joon is no exception. Time is ticking down, seemingly counting down someone's life. Tae-ho's whereabouts are still unknown. The message includes a link. Yoon-kai clicks it and is shocked to discover a video of Tae-ho bound and captive. A live-streamed death countdown. The jurors rush to inform the police. PDB sits still, his face etched with worry. The 2 brothers watch the live stream, noticing the rope around Tae-ho's neck tightening at intervals. The police trace the video's IP address to an internet cafe in the city. But when they arrive, the computer is unoccupied. The countdown timer shows 14 hours remaining. Tae-ho is now forced to stand on his tiptoes. He hastily pulls a chair under him and stands on it to breathe. Yoon-kai suddenly hears a strange sound. Turning up the volume, she clearly hears the ticking of a clock. Sung Joon recognizes the sound. After a moment, he remembers it's the clock chime from Driver Choi's house. But Sung Hoon argues that that type of wall clock is common. How can they be sure it's from Driver Choi's house? However, arguing is pointless. Instead of bickering, it's better to investigate. Ignoring his brother's objections, Sung Joon brought Yoon-kai to the watchman's shack. To their shock, they actually found Tae-ho hanging. He rushed to embrace Tae-ho, only to realize something was wrong. Looking up, he saw it was just a mannequin. Meanwhile, the police had located Tae-ho's phone. The location was pinpointed to a remote area. Upon arrival, they discovered the phone in a pit, beside a white skeleton wearing a necklace. At this point, Tae-ho's demeanor in the livestream began to crumble. He knew he couldn't escape and confessed, revealing he was the informant all those years ago. He was the reason the escape plan failed, leading to number 24's death. PDB seemed to realize something. He rushed to his office, retrieving several videotapes from the bottom of a drawer, labeled 2002 Hope Welfare Institute. He then grabbed a camcorder and went into the restroom. The content remained unknown, but his expression was filled with anguish. Simultaneously, Sung Joon also seemed to remember something. He ran home, asking Mrs. Na where he was adopted from. But this was her biggest secret, so naturally, she wouldn't tell him. Fortunately, Yoon-kai managed to find a clue. 20 years ago, Sung Joon lived in the Hope Welfare Institute. The place was now abandoned. After obtaining the address, he prepared to leave, but his mother tried to stop him. He pushed her hand away and left without hesitation. Just as he reached the gate, a sudden headache struck him. Dusty memories seemed on the verge of resurfacing. Sung Hoon also received the news and was on his way. Moon Kang's men followed Sung Joon. Enduring the pain, he pushed open the large door and resolutely stepped inside. Upon entering, he was ambushed by a mysterious figure in a raincoat who injected him with an anesthetic. The figure then turned and left. Sung Joon stumbled after him. By now, Tae-ho was nearing his breaking point. His heartbeat ceased. In that instant, Tae-ho was hanged. Before losing consciousness, Sung Joon noticed a yellow mark on the attacker's shoe. The place where Tae-ho was held captive felt familiar to both Sung Joon and PDB. Years ago, the escaping squad had been captured and confined to a small room. PDB had risked his life to film it. Joon Ki had written extensively on the back wall, just like the writing on the wall where Tae-ho was held. Tae-ho's fate was the punishment for the betrayal years ago. In truth, Tae-ho had a chance to live, but consumed by guilt, he kicked the chair away and chose death. When Sung Joon woke up, Sung Hoon had arrived. The two brothers worked together to lower Tae-ho. However, they were too late. Tae-ho was no longer breathing. Sung Joon, remembering the ambush, decided to find his attacker and settle the score. But as they left, they encountered Moon Kang and his men. Although Sung Joon was a skilled fighter, Sung Hoon was overpowered. In the end, both brothers were forced to surrender. Moon Kang, eager for revenge, wanted Sung Joon to experience the pain of losing a loved one. Seeing his brother in danger, Sung Joon broke free and charged forward. At that moment, the police arrived. Both sides immediately ceased their struggle. Now, things were complicated. Sung Joon, a fugitive, was at the scene of Tae-ho's death. Theoretically, with Yoon Kai and Sung Hoon present, they could testify that Sung Joon came to save Tae-ho, not to kill him. But if Yoon Kai testified, she would be held accountable for harboring a fugitive. While she didn't care, Sung Joon didn't want to involve her. As for Sung Hoon, it turned out he was the one who called the police. But this wasn't a mistake. He had his reasons. On his way to the Hope Welfare Institute, he noticed Moon Kang following him. In that urgent situation, calling the police was the best option. Otherwise, they would have died at Moon Kang's hands. But Moon Kang was one step ahead. He chose to be arrested by the police, knowing it would give him another opportunity to strike. The pressure now mounted on the chief. After careful consideration, he summoned Officer Kang and ordered him to create an opportunity for Moon Kang to kill Sung Joon and then eliminate Moon Kang afterward. Officer Kang hesitated. Having Moon Kang run errands was one thing, but murder was another. The chief chuckled. It's not like it's his first time killing someone. What's there to be afraid of? It turned out that Officer Kang had discovered that Man Chun's son wasn't dead after the initial attack, so he had suffocated the boy with a pillow. Hearing this, Officer Kang no longer dared to resist. However, unwilling to be controlled by the chief, he informed Moon Kang of the plan, hoping to gain leverage over the chief and secure his own survival. But Moon Kang wasn't easily manipulated. After unlocking his handcuffs, he immediately killed Officer Kang. He then proceeded to the interrogation room, disabled the surveillance cameras, and prepared to kill Sung Joon himself in an act of revenge. Meanwhile, Sung Hoon had handed over a USB drive to the police, claiming it contained drone footage of Man Chun's murderer. The footage revealed Moon Kang pushing Man Chun off the building. It was also him who killed Man Chun's wife. Sung Joon was now in grave danger. However, Sung Joon wasn't just anyone. With the protagonist's aura, he managed to turn the tables. Fortunately, the police arrived just as Sung Joon was about to kill Moon Kang in self-defense, preventing him from doing so. Thanks to the evidence provided by Sung Hoon, the suspicion surrounding Sung Joon was finally cleared. He no longer needed to hide. When Moon Kang's wife's body was discovered, another charge was added to his mounting offenses. Although Man Chun's case was solved, other cases remained a mystery. Sung Joon, newly reinstated, threw himself back into work. While examining the call logs between Moon Kang and Officer Kang, he discovered they both contacted the same phone number. He dialed the number and instantly recognized the chief's voice. He immediately went to Captain O and informed him. They decided to work together. Captain O feigned drunkenness and caused a commotion in the chief's office, while Sung Joon took the opportunity to steal the chief's phone. He stumbled upon some photos. They were of the skeletal remains where T-Ho's phone was found. Checking the chief's call log revealed numerous calls to Moon Kang. In the messages, there was one from Hai Jin dated April 19th, but she had died on the 15th. Clicking on it revealed a video taken before Hai Jin's death. Sung Joon stared at the brutality in the video, unable to compose himself. Meanwhile, Sung Hoon was jogging in the park. As he bent down to tie his shoelaces, he noticed yellow paint on the soles of his shoes. Could it be that he had orchestrated everything? Sung Hoon's hobby was sculpting, and the wooden sculpture he was completing depicted children promising to run away together. It seemed that Sung Hoon was indeed a member of the runaway group from all those years ago. Remembering the past, Sung Hoon choked back tears. When Sung Joon visited the Welfare Institute to investigate, he finally understood everything. Not only had T-Ho died there, but so had Hai Jin and Rai. He felt like he had been there before. It turned out that he hadn't been locked up there as a child, but he had visited and met number 13, Jun Ki. From a nun, Yun Kai learned that Jun Ki, Jun Chung, and an older child had stayed there. The older child was number 11. All three were later sent to the Hope Welfare Institute. When it closed, the nuns searched for them. Number 11 had been adopted, Jun Chung had disappeared, and Jun Ki had died. Yun Kai was astonished. The police suspected the perpetrator was someone who had been at the Hope Welfare Institute 20 years ago and was now taking revenge on those who had tormented them. The question now was who the perpetrator's next target would be. Since the jurors were somehow connected to the Hope Welfare Institute, Sung Joon planned to start his investigation with them. He learned that Chef Lee's brother had died as a child, but according to Chef Lee, his brother had only gone missing. After years of fruitless searching, he was finally declared dead. Chef Lee's parents also thought their son might be in an orphanage, so they searched for orphanages both large and small. However, they didn't go directly but asked the chief to inquire on their behalf. 20 years ago, PDB did an investigative program on the Hope Welfare Institute, but no one knows why he stopped the program. As for teacher Kyeonja, she once encountered children who were caught after running away. What impressed her most was number 13. His future was drenched in blood. As for In-sung, he was very young at the time and was adopted from an orphanage to America. Whether he came from the Hope Welfare Institute, he doesn't know. His parents were American, and he was too young to ask at the time. Later, Sung Joon brought In-sung to Suk-hee's restaurant. Her son went missing 20 years ago, but she hasn't given up looking for him, so she treats Sung Joon like her own son. Hearing this, In-sung seemed to be deep in thought. As for Yun Kai, she had absolutely no connection to the Hope Welfare Institute that Sung Joon mentioned. Before he was adopted, his name was Jun Ki. However, according to what she knows, Jun Ki died 20 years ago, and there's even a grave. After hearing this, Sung Joon was very confused. If Jun Ki died, why did he always think he was Jun Ki? Thinking about this, he started to get a headache. Fragments of memories resurfaced. When he was young, he accidentally fell. While recovering at home, he overheard his parents talking and learned that he was adopted. At that time, he was very sad. Because of the accident, he lost his memory. He didn't know who he was, only remembering that before he fell, someone called him Jun Ki. Later, a friend also called him that, but he couldn't remember who these two people were. Later, the two went for drinks. Sung Joon drank a lot, and Yun Kai couldn't control him, so she called Sung Hoon to take him away. Sung Hoon was startled. It seemed like he was that person. Sung Hoon, easily agitated, tends towards self-harm. Only in this way could he calm down. The next morning, he pretended nothing had happened and asked Sung Joon, "Why did you drink so much?" Sung Joon didn't say much, only that Jun Ki died 20 years ago. At the same time, Yun Kai went to find her mother. Her mother is Nurse Cho, the person Moon Kang had sought out before. This time, Yun Kai came to ask her mother about the Hope Welfare Institute. Hearing this, Nurse Cho trembled but pretended to be calm and said she had never heard of it. Yoon Kai mentioned the father she had never met and wanted to learn more about him. But every time she brought this up, her mother became extremely agitated. This time was no exception. Surprisingly, In Sung was also there. Nurse Cho looked at him, finding him somewhat familiar. Meanwhile, Sung Joon was watching the wedding scene video. He suddenly discovered that although Tae-ho was also at the scene, there was someone dressed in black who was even more suspicious. At the time, Sung Joon was chasing Tae-ho, but also saw that person and suspected it was Sung Hoon. That evening, Sung Hoon was following Yoon Kai when Yoona spotted him, so he bought Yoona some delicious food to keep her quiet. At the same time, Sung Joon went to see Moon Kang, wanting to learn something from him. Moon Kang still insisted that Joon Ki killed his daughter. But when he saw Joon Ki's death certificate, he was also surprised. However, he kept his mouth shut, not revealing anything. Later, his underlings came to visit. It seemed Moon Kang was arranging for his underlings to do something. Sung Joon, having prepared in advance, followed the underlings to Nurse Cho's place. No one expected that Sung Hoon was reviewing the 2002 corruption case. Nurse Cho was one of the witnesses from that year, so he was also keeping an eye on her. Moon Kang's underlings came to find Nurse Cho to inquire about Joon Ki's specific situation, but she didn't know why Joon Ki died. After the underling left, Nurse Cho finally breathed a sigh of relief. From this expression, it seemed she knew something. But soon after, Sung Joon came to inquire about the Hope Welfare Institute. She was about to say she didn't know, but she was slightly taken aback when she saw the necklace around Sung Joon's neck. This was the very necklace she had given Joon Ki years ago. After speaking, she immediately regretted it. Finally, under Sung Joon's questioning, Nurse Cho revealed that Joon Ki had been with number 11 and number 12. Number 11 was older than Joon Ki. Furthermore, number 11 and the two Joon Ki siblings came from the same place. Number 12 was likely the same age as Joon Ki or younger, very small. When number 12 ran away, their leg was unfortunately caught in a trap and severely injured. Sung Joon urged her to be careful, as anyone connected to the Hope Welfare Institute could become the killer's target. Upon hearing that her daughter was Yoon Kai, he immediately became worried. That evening, Yoon Kai had a breakthrough. The nun had found an old photo of the two Joon Ki siblings and number 11. Everyone knew that the closer they got to the truth, the more dangerous it became. As she was studying the picture, Sung Joon suddenly called. He said he was coming right over, and for her safety, she should go into the storage room and lock the door. As soon as Yoon Kai hung up, a whistling sound came from outside. Yoona, who was inside the storage room, heard it too. Yoon Kai stepped out of the office. Yoona also prepared to leave the storage room. When Sung Joon arrived at the office, although he didn't see Yoon Kai, he saw the photo. Number 11's face caused him a headache. Some memories immediately surfaced. Sung Hoon had been adopted by his parents later than him, and he looked just like this back then. His head spun. No longer concerned about Yoon Kai, he went straight home to find his brother. But Sung Hoon wasn't home. On the table were 5 carved figurines, each with a number on the back. Now, he could be certain that his brother was number 11. At this moment, Yoon Kai was being gagged. Looking up, she discovered it was Sung Hoon. Sung Joon also discovered some photos in a drawer. They were all of the surviving jurors. From Sung Joon's perspective, there were 2 possibilities. 1. His brother was also searching for clues. 2. His brother was the killer. He leaned more towards the second possibility, but he still had to find his brother to confirm. However, no matter how many times he called, Sung Hoon didn't answer. He then called Suk-gu to locate Sung Hoon's phone. Ever since Sung Joon had cleared her name, Miss Na's future was bright. After many ups and downs, she finally became the Minister of Health and Welfare. Just as she was secretly celebrating, Sung Joon rushed in to ask about the adoption. Miss Na didn't admit it, saying that she had given birth to both of them. Sung Joon then produced a photo that frightened her, leaving her speechless. At this moment, Mr. Ryu happened to return. He said that everything was for Sung Hoon. Even though the world had changed, if people heard that Sung Hoon was adopted, he would inevitably be treated differently. Regarding the Hope Welfare Institute, they had only happened to hear about its closure. Seeing the children there with nowhere to go, they decided to adopt one. Moreover, this was also for Sung Jun's benefit, fearing he would be lonely on his own. But there was one thing that Sung Jun found strange. It was clearly his brother who was adopted, so why did he always feel like he was the adopted one? Looking back on everything in the past, his parents also favored his brother more. The three of them got along very well. It seemed like he was the extra one. Afterwards, Suk-gu called, stating that Sung Hoon's last known location was near Yun-kai. There were some blood stains nearby, and a security camera in the vicinity had been destroyed. Judging from various traces, it appeared the perpetrator was targeting Yun-kai. After tracking Sung Hoon's vehicle through the road surveillance system, they discovered the vehicle's last recorded location was at the crossroads leading into the mountains. Sung Jun went there and indeed found Sung Hoon's car. He was also digging a hole, seemingly to bury something. Sung Jun assumed that Yun-kai was the one being buried and frantically began digging. But it turned out to be just the corpse of an animal. Sung Hoon explained that he had found it dead on the road and couldn't just leave it there. At this point, Yun-kai also appeared. It turned out Sung Hoon was only trying to protect Yun-kai because there was another man in black clothing at the scene, the real perpetrator. Despite Yun-kai's testimony, Sung Jun was still not completely convinced. He questioned Sung Hoon about why he had concealed the fact that he was number 11 from the Hope Welfare Institution. Sung Hoon immediately replied that if he revealed he was number 11, everyone would surely suspect him of being the perpetrator. Immediately afterward, Sung Jun received a text message with an attached photo of him with Yuna, along with the message, "It's all your fault." He immediately realized Yuna was in danger. At that moment, Yun-kai remembered that Yuna was hiding in the storage room, so the three of them immediately raced back there. Sung Hoon was the first to reach the storage room. He was struck by the sight of a metal locker with a pool of blood underneath it. When he opened the locker, Sung Hoon broke down in tears. Yuna had indeed been murdered. Upon seeing this scene, Yun-kai collapsed on the spot. After that, Sung Jun took Sung Hoon back to investigate the death of Jun-ki. Sung Hoon recounted that after being adopted, he learned some of Yoon Young's whereabouts, but it wasn't very clear. The Hope Welfare Institution was actually a filthy and horrible place, like a large prison. The children there were as if serving a life sentence. During the day they had to work, and at night they went to sleep, regardless of their age or health. The food was just rotten vegetables and moldy rice balls. The children who didn't die of disease were also beaten to death. If they were lucky, they would be buried on the mountain. If they were unlucky, they would be sent away to donate their organs. The only way to survive was to escape. However, every escape plan failed. The last time, they could have succeeded, but T-ho betrayed everyone. Even so, Sung Hoon understood, because every time they made a mistake, T-ho was the one who was beaten the most. At first, the children just thought they had encountered some bad people. But when they realized that all other places were the same, they understood a much more terrifying truth. Calling them orphans was an exaggeration. They were more like stray dogs. Upon hearing these words, the director realized he had made a mistake. It turned out that Sung Hoon was the child who had lived in the welfare institution. He hastily relayed this news to Moon Kang. At this moment, revenge was secondary. The urgent matter was to prevent the truth of what happened years ago from being exposed. They absolutely had to eliminate Sung Hoon. Meanwhile, Sung Jun returned to the scene once more and discovered some bloodstains that formed writing on the locker. This was an important message Yuna had left regarding her death. The police thought it was just a random coincidence. The killer's target was Yun-kai, a member of the jury. Currently, Yun-kai was temporarily staying at Sung Jun's house. When she went out, she was always accompanied by police officers. The other jurors, while not as heavily protected as Yun-kai, had each received a smartwatch that allowed them to call for help in case of danger. As for the BPD Bureau of Public Disclosure, his whereabouts were currently unknown. Considering the killer was becoming increasingly brazen, if the BPD had been murdered, the police would have likely found his body by now. Thus, he could only be temporarily declared missing. At the same time, the BPD had put something in a locker before he vanished. On another note, Yun-kai learned that her mother had once worked at the Hope Welfare Institution. Therefore, she went to find her mother, hoping she could reveal the truth. At this point, her mother finally disclosed that years ago, she had discovered horrible things happening at the institution and had reported it to the television station. The station then sent the BPD to film, but ultimately nothing was ever revealed. Meanwhile, the BPD was intercepted by a mysterious person. Upon seeing their face, he was very shocked. According to the autopsy results, Yu Na had many bruises on her body, mostly from resisting. She had fought back very fiercely. Sung Jun returned to the police station and reorganized the clues. Number 13, Jun Ki, and number 7, Tae-ho, were dead. The two who were still alive were number 11 and number 12. Number 11 was Sung Hoon's older brother, while number 12's identity was unknown, and their life status was uncertain. The perpetrator was definitely one of these two, or possibly both of them. While reviewing the information on Yu Na's phone, Sung Jun found several photos of her with Sung Hoon. They seemed quite close. In addition, there was a candid photo, which was a crucial piece of evidence. Sung Hoon had gone to Driver Choi's house on May 15th, the day Tae-ho's incident happened. At that time, Sung Jun had suspected Tae-ho was at Driver Choi's house, but Sung Hoon had adamantly stopped him, saying he was just wasting time. This showed that Sung Hoon had already known that Tae-ho wasn't there. But why did he stop him without revealing the truth? Subsequently, Sung Jun sought out the video footage of Man Chun's death and discovered that it wasn't a drone but rather footage taken from an advertising balloon. Furthermore, the time of the video capture was 3 or 4 days after the incident. This meant that Sung Hoon had known very early on that Man Chun was the perpetrator. But why had he concealed the evidence? This series of actions was very suspicious. Yoon Kai then told Sung Jun that the BPD had a video taken at the Hope Welfare Institution, hoping to expose the dark truth at that time. Right at this moment, someone reported having seen the BPD. The informant was the same person who had accidentally bumped into him that day. She remembered that the BPD had put something into a locker number 17, but everything inside had been taken. Checking the security camera footage, the police discovered that the person who took the items was wearing a black outfit and a black hat, looking very similar to the suspect in the previous case involving Mr. Kang's daughter. Sung Jun had seen this person before and suspected it was his brother. This suspicion increased when he immediately ran home and rummaged through Sung Hoon's closet to see if he had any clothes that matched the ones in the video. Unfortunately, he found nothing. However, in Sung Hoon's car trunk, he discovered a black jacket, a black hat, and a pair of shoes with yellow markings. This was solid evidence. Sung Jun decided to go back to confront Sung Hoon, but he saw him heading out, so he followed. Sung Jun tracked Sung Hoon to a secluded location. Soon after, a person dressed in black appeared. Unexpectedly, that person stabbed Sung Hoon with a knife and then nonchalantly walked away. Sung Jun quickly rushed Sung Hoon to the hospital. The doctors did their best. Although he wasn't in critical condition, Sung Hoon was still unconscious and unable to regain awareness. Sung Jun sat by his bedside and fell asleep without realizing it. In his dream, he remembered the day of his accident. It turned out that when Sung Hoon had called out Jun Ki, he wasn't calling for him, but for the person behind him who had pushed him down. Witnessing his brother's attempted assassination shattered all of Sung Jun's doubts. After that, he took people to the scene to investigate and discovered a camera. Unfortunately, the camera hadn't captured the perpetrator's face. He suspected that the perpetrator was number 12, an individual with an unknown identity. Therefore, Sung Jun prepared to go find Moon Kang to ask for information. But unexpectedly, Moon Kang had gone insane and had been admitted to a mental hospital. Looking at his condition, Sung Jun feared he wouldn't be able to get any information from him. He turned back and found the chief, stating frankly that he knew about what happened back then. The chief thought for a moment, and then told him that if he wanted to know the truth, he should go find his mother. Miss Na, who had just been appointed, was approached by a mother seeking help. The woman said her child had previously been in the welfare institution. After returning home, the child had become abnormal. Miss Na feigned calmness, telling the woman to go home and wait for news, but as soon as she turned away, she ordered her subordinates to chase the woman away. Sung Jun went to find his mother and accidentally saw this scene. He then went to investigate the matter. The woman explained that years ago, due to work demands, she had temporarily placed her child in the welfare institution. When she dropped him off, the child was normal, but when he returned, he had become strange. He wouldn't even respond when called by his name, only reacting to the number 45. Sung Joon tried to communicate with number 45, asking him if he knew number 11 and number 12, but there was no reaction. However, when asked about number 24, number 45 seemed to be agitated, constantly admitting to doing wrong and showing fear of being beaten. From this, it was clear that he definitely knew something. But the question was how to get him to talk. Yoon Kai, an expert in this field, had counseled many children with psychological trauma. During their interactions, Yoon Kai noticed that number 45 often wrote many numbers. After thinking about it for a long time, she decided to go find Miss Suk-hee. Yoon Kai recounted that years ago, she had gotten lost, and a mother wearing a gray jacket, beige pants, and white sneakers had bought her vanilla ice cream. Upon hearing this, Miss Suk-hee immediately became emotional and burst into tears. The mother and daughter, separated for many years, had finally recognized each other. However, Chef Lee, who was standing at the door watching this scene, appeared to be very jealous. After a day of trying, Yoon Kai had gathered a piece of paper full of numbers. To get number 45 to talk, it might still require more time. Sung Joon showed her the interrogation video of Sung Hoon in which he mentioned the welfare institution. The next day, Miss Suk-hee came to thank Sung Joon for helping her find her son, In Sung, after so many years of separation. Sung Joon was also very surprised. He never expected such a coincidence. He felt it would be best to still be cautious and get a DNA test. But Miss Suk-hee felt it was unnecessary. Wouldn't a mother recognize her own child? Seeing how emotional she was, everyone felt happy for her. However, after the chief learned about this, his attitude became somewhat strange. He immediately invited Miss Suk-hee to his office to inquire about the details. After learning that In Sung had been in a car accident and had lost most of his childhood memories, he seemed relieved. This aroused suspicion in Miss Suk-hee. According to her memories, she had intentionally abandoned her son that year. Not long after, Miss Suk-hee invited Sung Joon and several police officers who had helped her find her son to a Japanese restaurant to celebrate. The jurors were also present. Kyung-ja sneezed throughout the entire time, seemingly having a cold. While Officer Na was pouring wine for Miss Suk-hee, he accidentally spilled wine on In Sung's pants. While wiping the wine, a scar on In Sung's ankle was revealed. That year, when number 12 escaped, he had unfortunately stepped into a trap. This made Sung Joon suspicious. He then sought an opportunity to talk with In Sung about the scar. In Sung didn't hide it, saying that he had the scar from before he was adopted. He didn't remember exactly how he got it, but he thought it was likely from stepping into a trap, because he often dreamt of running in the forest and stepping on an animal trap. The chief was also secretly observing In Sung. It seemed he had guessed that In Sung was number 12. Although number 12's identity had been confirmed, there was nothing suspicious about him. At this point, all the suspicion turned towards number 24, whose life status was unknown. The head chef Lee's brother was very suspicious, as he had disappeared many years ago and his whereabouts were still unknown. The parents of head chef Lee had asked the chief to search for him at the Hope Welfare Institution, but considering what the lady boss had gone through, it seemed the chief had not helped in the search but instead had hindered it. The head chef Lee's brother had a similar situation. Sung Joon remembered that the last time he went to the chief's office, he had seen some photos of a skeleton. After taking out the photo to look at it, a necklace caught his attention. According to the forensic doctor, the skeleton was of a girl around 14 years old, and the cause of death was unclear. Sung Joon suspected that it was Yoon Young. They used facial reconstruction technology, and it was indeed as he had thought. The question was, why had the perpetrator led the police to Yoon Young's skeleton? Soo Young gave Sung Joon an analysis report on a fragment of a weapon found in Yoon Young. It wasn't a regular knife, but likely one restored by a renowned artisan in the country. Based on the blade, it was probably a sashimi knife, with traces of use in the kitchen. Head chef Lee was very skilled at cutting sashimi with knives. On the other hand, Yoon Kai and number 45 were getting along very well. When mentioning number 7 and number 24, number 45 whispered to her that both of them had escaped. Furthermore, he also revealed that number 24's name was Hoon Oh. Yoon Kai immediately informed Sung Joon. At this time, Sung Jun was searching for clues with the head chef Lee. Upon hearing the name Hun-Oh, the head chef Lee appeared very flustered, secretly hiding the knife. Hun-Oh was the name of his brother. This small action of head chef Lee did not escape Sung Jun's eyes. Sung Jun immediately rushed in and discovered that it was a bloody knife, and also that the tip of the knife was missing. Head chef Lee was taken for questioning. He admitted that he was the one who stabbed Sung Hun that night, but refused to disclose his motive. Sung Jun sensed that something was wrong. Head chef Lee might not be the perpetrator. On the contrary, it seemed like he was trying to cover something up. Sung Jun changed his thinking, going to find the knife artisan. Although the artisan didn't remember who had bought the knife, he had recorded the knife numbers in a ledger. After checking, they found that the buyer was Jun Ki. He had said he bought it to give to his younger brother, and had also said that his younger brother was a skilled chef. This terrified Sung Jun. He never expected Jun Ki was still alive. Thinking it over, he felt that it probably wasn't Jun Ki. What if it was the surviving number 24, disguised as someone else? Head chef Lee was very tight-lipped, refusing to confess anything. The police didn't rush to exhume Jun Ki's grave, but instead excavated the area where Yoon Young's bones were found. They unearthed many sets of bones. In addition, there was a piece of clothing with the number 24 on it. While organizing the clues, Sung Jun suddenly remembered that before she died, Yoon-Ah had written a few words in blood. Therefore, he went to ask Yoon Kai if she knew anyone else that Yoon-Ah might have known who had a name resembling that message. Unfortunately, Yoon Kai didn't know either. Meanwhile, Moon Kang's subordinates arrived at the mental hospital. It turned out that they had already planned to break out this way. The first thing he did after getting out was to go find number 11 for revenge. In the meantime, Yoon Kai suddenly remembered that Yoon-Ah had met In Sung before. Sung Jun immediately went to check the adoption records and found a picture of In Sung as a child. Unexpectedly, he was actually Jun Ki. Over there, In Sung disguised himself as a doctor to enter Sung Hun's hospital room. At this time, Sung Hun had also regained consciousness. It turned out that the person who stabbed him that night was In Sung. Seeing that Sung Hun was still alive, he was about to attack, but Moon Kang arrived. In Sung had to temporarily retreat. Moon Kang originally intended to force Sung Hun to reveal Jun Ki's whereabouts, but he immediately became suspicious of the doctor from just now. Unfortunately, by the time he chased outside, Jun Ki had disappeared. Sung Jun discovered Jun Ki's true identity. First, he went to find Miss Suk-hee, but the restaurant was closed. She had just found her son who had been missing for many years and wanted to rest for a few days. The next morning, she woke up very early, preparing a lavish breakfast. However, Jun Ki said that he wasn't in the habit of eating breakfast, which made her feel very awkward. At this time, he was reminiscing about what happened back then. When Miss Suk-hee's son had first arrived at the welfare institution, he had hidden in the corner to cry, thinking that his mother had only gone to the restroom and would soon come back to get him. Jun Ki had stepped forward to comfort him, saying that this place was full of abandoned children. Going to the restroom is just an excuse. Once they leave, they won't come back. Furthermore, Jun Ki had also said that he could help him kill his mother as punishment. Thinking of that, Jun Ki asked Miss Suk-hee, "Why did you abandon your son back then?" Miss Suk-hee trembled, causing the bowl in her hand to fall to the ground. She remembered that day, many years ago. Initially, it was true that she had intended to abandon her son, but as soon as she boarded the bus, she regretted it. When she went back, her son had disappeared, nowhere to be found. Meanwhile, Sung Jun went to visit Sung Hun. He needed a reasonable explanation. Why did Sung Hun know that Moon Kang had killed Man Chun but not report it? Why did he know that Tae-ho wasn't at Driver Choi's house and not say so clearly? Why did his shoe soles have yellow markings? Sung Hun explained that he wanted to catch the real perpetrator. He had discovered that Moon Kang was also looking for that person, so he wanted to cast a line to catch a big fish. He intended to follow behind Moon Kang to find clues. Regarding the yellow marks on his shoes, Sung Hun explained that he had accidentally stepped on them while walking through a park that was being painted. Sung Hun also told him that the person who stabbed him that night was In Sung, also known as Jun Ki. Sung Jun immediately went to Miss Suk-hee's house to take Jun Ki's toothbrush. The results came back quickly. They were not mother and son, but he was related to the 14-year-old girl's skeleton as her sibling. Sung Jun went to Miss Suk-hee's house once more but only found her phone. She was nowhere to be seen. Jun-ki had begun his move, and the missing BPD was also in his hands. At this point, the chief received a photo of him raping Yoon-young. The person also blackmailed him for 100 million. The chief and Moon Kang analyzed it, guessing that this wasn't the BPD's tactic, but rather Jun-ki's way of operating. They decided to take advantage of the ransom exchange to eliminate Jun-ki. On the other side, Miss Na also received news about Jun-ki. Yoon-kai was no exception. Her mother had been captured by him, and he demanded that she go to a designated location where someone would pick her up. That person unexpectedly turned out to be head chef Lee. The police were very stressed out at this point. A total of 8 people had gone missing. Sung Jun discovered a clue in a picture drawn by number 45. Sung Hoon immediately associated it with a place, the 240 resort, where Run Chung had been imprisoned. The two rushed over there. There was a bomb on the door. Jun-ki had been waiting for a long time. He told Sung Jun, "The moment you open that door, the house will explode and everyone will die." There was something unusual in the oil drum nearby. The two brothers opened it and discovered a dead body. Sung Jun immediately requested backup. After that, he yelled out the names of several missing people, but received no response. He felt very strange. If 8 people were inside, why wasn't there even a little bit of sound? Thinking carefully about Jun-ki's words, he concluded that the people weren't locked up here. Sung Hoon immediately thought of the Hope Welfare Institution. At the same time, the chief woke up from his coma, looked around, and realized this was where children were imprisoned years ago. The missing people were also here. He remembered that when he had taken the ransom money and ran to the exchange point. The original plan was to wait for Jun-ki to appear, then Moon Kang would go in to take care of him. But when Jun-ki arrived, he still didn't see Moon Kang. After that, he was shot and fell into a coma. Now, Moon Kang was right next to him, his feet covered in blood. It turned out that Moon Kang hadn't not come, but he had been lured into stepping on an animal trap, then brought here. The others also gradually woke up, looking at the large locked door, and the bomb placed on the door. They were immediately thrown into a panic. Jun-ki's voice came from a speaker. He wanted to play a game, choose a representative to die, and he would spare the lives of the others. This was so interesting. Humans were very selfish. Who would be willing to sacrifice themselves for the benefit of others? To make the game more interesting, Jun-ki only gave them 10 minutes to think. Yoon-kai was the first to speak. Jun-ki is a murderous devil who doesn't bat an eye. His words could not be trusted. Only by uniting would they have a chance of survival. However, the others didn't think the same way. Sometimes sacrificing one person for the greater good was the obvious thing to do. Instead of wasting time uselessly, they should pick someone to go out first, but who to choose? Just as everyone was hesitating, Miss Suk-hee stepped forward. She was willing to sacrifice herself for everyone. Having chosen who would die, they had to choose who would carry out the action. Moon Kang was the most suitable candidate. Yoon-kai protected the lady boss behind her. If they had to choose someone to die, it should be the person who had done wrong. They couldn't sacrifice an innocent person. These words resonated with everyone. Kyung-ja said that she was innocent. It was just that 20 years ago she had seen Moon Kang capture some children. But she had concealed something. That year, she had actually said that Jun-ki had to be killed. The BPD also claimed he was innocent, saying that year he had only come to uncover the truth about this place. But the nurse vividly remembered that he had covered up the truth. The BPD immediately retorted that she wasn't any better. That year, when they were about to die, instead of sending them to a doctor, she had treated them herself, despite not having qualifications. The nurse hastily explained that she was just a small nurse without power, which was why she had asked the BPD for help. He had clearly promised to broadcast it on the news, but ultimately went back on his word. Seeing that the finger was now pointed at her, the BPD turned his attention to Miss Na. That year, Miss Na had given him a large sum of money to silence him. Miss Na quickly denied responsibility, saying that the BPD wanted to send his child to study abroad, so he was seduced by money, and it had nothing to do with her. Moreover, the chief was the most egregious. For such a small amount of money, He had brought lost children to the welfare institution to imprison them, and lied to their parents that they could not be found. Miss Suk-hee couldn't remain calm after hearing this. Over the years, she had caused no small amount of trouble for the chief while searching for her son, so she felt both guilty and grateful. In the end, it turned out that she herself was the fool. Seeing that the chief was becoming the focus of criticism, the BPD added that it was the chief who had raped Yoon Young that year. The nurse also knew about it. Yoon Young was killed by him. Seeing that the situation wasn't going well for him, the chief turned the finger to Moon Kang. He had done many bad things, frequently locking up children here and hanging them upside down. He had even released hunting dogs to bite the children to death. With the situation having escalated to this point, Moon Kang only needed to kill the BPD. But Yoon Kai jumped out, blaming Moon Kang for not only killing adults, but also not sparing children. He directly gave up on the BPD and prepared to attack her. Unexpectedly, at the crucial moment, the nurse yelled, "Yoon Kai is his daughter." It turned out that Yoon Kai was born after her mother was raped by him. Joon Ki, seeing that they still hadn't made a move, went to urge the chief and the BPD, who quickly knelt down and begged for forgiveness. Suddenly, there was the sound of sirens outside. Joon Ki quickly returned to his car. Through the camera, he saw Sung Joon approaching the place of imprisonment. The bomb was less than a minute away from exploding. Joon Ki became excited. The time had come. He lightly pressed the remote, but there was no explosion as he had hoped. He quickly went to check, and discovered that the bomb had been disabled, and the people inside had also disappeared. Carefully going inside to investigate, Sung Hoon slowly appeared. Before he could even express his surprise, Sung Joon also appeared from behind. He couldn't understand what was happening, demanding that Sung Hoon give him an explanation. But Sung Hoon didn't say a word. Joon Ki was captured just like that. The news was widely circulated. The chief was very depressed, afraid that his crimes would be exposed. As for Miss Na, when interviewed, she didn't admit to being kidnapped, saying that she had just gone to persuade the criminal. She also revealed that her eldest son came from the welfare institution, hoping that Sung Hoon wouldn't care about his background being exposed. What he cared about was whether what she said about going there to persuade the criminal was true or false. Miss Na then changed her attitude, saying that persuasion was something you do with humans, not monsters. Joon Ki was haunted by what had happened 20 years ago, and because of that he indiscriminately killed innocent people. This monster was not worthy of sympathy. These words left Sung Hoon feeling a little disappointed. On this side, the chief ordered the investigation to be closed within the week and handed over to the prosecution. Just say he's insane and the victim was random. However, calling him insane is one thing, but saying the victim was random doesn't quite fit. It was clearly premeditated. Sung Joon interrogated Joon Ki. However, he remained arrogant. He believed that without Sung Hoon's help, he wouldn't have been caught. When he learned that Sung Hoon claimed he was the one who stabbed him, Joon Ki was somewhat surprised. Sung Joon presented a photograph taken at the scene. However, it didn't show his face, so he didn't admit to being the perpetrator. Moreover, he refused to confess to the other murders unless presented with evidence. This made things difficult. The police indeed had no evidence. Continuing like this, they could only charge him with the attempted murder of Sung Hoon and the special assault charge for kidnapping 8 people. Sung Joon suddenly remembered something. Joon Ki liked to record videos when committing his crimes. Almost every scene had a camera. If they could find the original video files, they could convict him. He then went to the evidence room to check and found a laptop but no hard drive inside. It turned out the chief had taken it. Inside wasn't only evidence of Joon Ki's crimes, but also dirty secrets of the chief's past. Therefore, he had to destroy it. Sung Joon went to see Sung Hoon for help, asking him to talk to Joon Ki. Because someone was monitoring them, they couldn't speak too openly. Joon Ki whispered into Sung Hoon's ear. It's unclear what was said before, but then Joon Ki said, "Why did you stop me from killing them all? You wanted to see it too." Then he added another sentence, "You won't betray me, will you?" Sung Joon didn't understand what the betrayal meant. Sung Hoon told him not to worry about it, that it was just nonsense. Regarding the evidence, he claimed to have hidden it in the safest place. Shortly after, Yoon Kai approached Sung Hoon, wanting to use the television station to reveal the horrific events that occurred at the Welfare Institute to the world. Sung Joon was still racking his brain trying to figure out where the safest place could be. Officer Na suddenly thought, could he have swallowed it? But this idea was quickly dismissed. At that moment, Mrs. Suk-hee arrived for a visit, wanting to see Joon Ki. It wasn't an unreasonable request, and they might even glean some information. Mrs. Suk-hee already knew he wasn't her son and wanted to ask where her real son was. Joon Ki explained that her son had run away years ago, fallen into a trap, and suffered without proper treatment, living in pain. So, he helped his friend find release. Until his death, he always said he missed his mother's cooking. Hearing these words, Mrs. Suk-hee's heart shattered. Immediately after, Sung Joon noticed someone wearing a Bluetooth earpiece. Joon Ki's casual actions flashed through his mind. He immediately went to the evidence room. Inside was indeed a Bluetooth earpiece. While nothing was hidden under the earpiece, only one earpiece was lit. He then visited Joon Ki again, starting with the first case. He wanted to know why Man Chun was involved. He said it was the groundwork for the jury's appearance. That night, Man Chun did see the perpetrator, but didn't clearly see that the person in the car was Joon Ki. Starting on Do's 20th birthday was meant to make Moon Kang remember the pain. All of this was understandable. But why target Hai Jin and even beat her, not clean and neat like the others? Joon Ki claimed that driver Choi did the beating. That night, he followed driver Choi and only dragged Hai Jin away after she was beaten. Finally, Sung Joon got to the main point, pointing out his two killing habits. 1. Slashing the victims' mouths, and 2. Recording videos as trophies. Then, Sung Joon showed him the video of the day he killed Mr. Kang's daughter. Time was tight that day, but he still didn't forget to record it. Sung Joon found it through his own skill, but Joon Ki stubbornly insisted that Sung Hoon had betrayed him. At that moment, he suddenly blurted something out. He said that back on the playground, he shouldn't have just given a light push. He should have just killed him then and there. This jolted Sung Joon's memory. It was from that moment he had lost his memory. Hearing his parents talk about adoption, he mistakenly believed he was adopted. The call of Joon Ki at the playground made him think he was Joon Ki. Later, Joon Ki affirmed this belief, leading him to live for years as Joon Ki. This suspicion was now resolved, but what about the necklace? There were 3 necklaces in total: Joon Ki's, Joon Chung's, and Sung Hoon's. Each person had one, representing the meaning, "We are a family." Sung Joon's necklace was a gift from Sung Hoon, carrying the same significance. Immediately after, news broke online about Mrs. Na and the director being kidnapped. There had to be a reason. Then, PPD contacted them for a meeting, revealing that the TV station would be airing a report on the orphanage's past. They hoped he hadn't acted rashly yet, but instead informed them first, clearly looking for a payoff. The two understood that money would only be a temporary fix. To fully escape the past, all evidence had to be destroyed. They divided the tasks. Mrs. Na would handle the payment, the director the destruction of evidence. Meanwhile, Joon Ki was transferred to the courthouse. When he met Sung Hoon, he seemed to be expecting something, but seeing his cold expression, he became agitated, sensing a plan he wasn't privy to. After calming down, he talked to Sung Joon about the necklace, claiming he didn't know what was going on. Then, he suddenly pushed him down the stairs. This fall triggered some of Sung Joon's memories. It turned out that the person who brainwashed him into believing he was Joon Ki was Sung Hoon. The betrayal came flooding back. Joon Ki had mentioned it many times, and he finally understood that Sung Hoon was the mastermind behind the scenes, orchestrating Joon Ki's serial killings. After regaining his composure, Sung Joon saw through Joon Ki's ploy. He didn't want to suffer alone, so he provoked Sung Joon to regain his memory. Put simply, it was like a child feeling neglected, seeking affection and attention. He had initially thought Joon Ki was the mastermind and Sung Hoon the accomplice, but upon closer inspection, everything started with Sung Hoon's involvement. First, the jury trial, then providing clues that seemed helpful to the investigation, but were actually obstructing it, leading the police astray, especially with the 240 villa. If Sung Joon hadn't tipped him off, he wouldn't have known where to run. After questioning Yoon Kai, he learned that 240 wasn't a clue she left behind. This solidified his suspicions. Meanwhile, Mrs. Na gave the money to PDB, who promised to stop the welfare center program, expressing hope, and handing over the video he supposedly had. He then went to a nearby alley, elated at his windfall, but his joy was short-lived. Someone appeared behind him. In an instant, PDB was struck in the head with a brick, the attacker only stopping after he was unconscious, then taking the money and leaving. Shortly after, Sung Hoon and Yoon Kai met. They had arranged to meet PDB to discuss the program, but he never showed. Calls went unanswered. Yoon Kai was puzzled, wondering why PDB would agree to do the program in the first place. Given his attitude during his imprisonment, he didn't seem like someone who would repent. In fact, it was Sung Hoon who suggested the video exchange with the director and Mrs. Na. The video in PDB's possession had long been stolen by Joon Ki. Sung Hoon's motive for orchestrating this was to gauge their reaction. Meanwhile, the director watched the video, but it was blank. He realized he had been tricked. However, he pondered, how could PDB dare to pull off such a blatant lie? At the same time, Mrs. Na received a delivery. The deliveryman was Chef Lee. Inside was a photo from years ago, showing Mr. Ryu entering Jun Chung's room. Mrs. Na was terrified. Mr. Ryu suspected PDB had sent it, but Mrs. Na found Sung Hoon more suspicious. After all, he knew everything they had done. Meanwhile, Sung Hoon and Yoon Kai returned home. Sung Jun, his face grim, placed the necklace on the table, giving Sung Hoon a meaningful look. He then pulled Yoon Kai aside to talk. He suspected Sung Hoon, urging Yoon Kai to move out immediately. The next morning, Sung Hoon went out for a jog. Sung Jun stealthily followed, discovering him and the chef plotting something. Later, Sung Jun received a call from Yoon Kai. She couldn't reach PDB and had gone to the TV station to inquire, but PDB hadn't shown up for work and hadn't called in sick. The welfare center program hadn't been approved either. He hung up. Suk-gu called to inform him that PDB was dead. Joon Ki was locked up and couldn't have done it. Chef Lee became the prime suspect. At the same time, Sung Hoon went to see Joon Ki about the necklace, which had been bothering him, so he specifically went to inquire about it. Joon Ki didn't hide anything, saying he saw that Sung Jun had only recovered half of his memory, so he gave him a hand. This was Sung Hoon's plan for many years, and he was furious that Joon Ki had ruined it, saying he deserved to be eliminated for not following the plan. On this side, Sung Jun went to a nearby restaurant to inquire and learned that PDB had met with two other people there. One of them was his mother, Mrs. Na. He went to the private room, glanced inside, and discovered a hidden camera. Afterward, he checked the surveillance footage and saw that the people meeting with PDB were Mrs. Na and the director. Each of them carried a bag, suggesting with 80% certainty that some kind of transaction was taking place. Before the three arrived, Sung Hoon had been in that same room, meaning he was the one who planted the hidden camera. After returning home, Sung Jun asked his mother why she met with PDB. Mrs. Na claimed she was being blackmailed. PDB threatened to expose something about the VI letter 1EC5 and fuck L letter 1E3 Iveen fuck Loy Welfare Center and pressured her to pay him hush money. Sung Jun didn't know what had happened in the past, but now that PDB was dead, he hoped his mother would make the right choice and not make any more mistakes. Back in his car, he called Sung Hoon, wanting to meet and talk. At that moment, Sung Hoon was watching the video of the three-person transaction and didn't have time to meet. Sung Hoon then laid his cards on the table, saying he knew Sung Jun had placed the hidden camera. Wasn't it to see what choice the three of them would make? Seeing that they chose to cover things up just like 20 years ago, he took action against PDB. Next would be the director and their mother. However, Sung Hoon neither confirmed nor denied this, telling Sung Jun to guess his next move. Sung Jun immediately went to the office to find him, but he wasn't there. At that time, Sung Hoon was rushing to Yoon Kai, giving her a set of documents and telling her to take care of them. Unable to find Sung Hoon, Sung Jun ran to find Joon Ki and asked, "After PDB, who is Sung Hoon planning to kill next?" Joon Ki was taken aback. It seemed that PDB's death wasn't part of the plan. At this point, Sung Jun still believed that Joon Ki had pressured his brother into this revenge scheme. Seeing this, Joon Ki could only tell him the truth. Everything was planned by Sung Hoon. The principle of revenge was an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. The first target was Mun. He needed to kill his daughter on her 20th birthday to make him feel the deepest pain. The second target was the director, whose most cherished person was his granddaughter. But Sung Hoon softened a bit, unwilling to harm the child, so he chose Hai Jin instead. The third target was driver Choi, killed without much ado. The fourth was Tae-ho. There were mitigating circumstances with him. Although he had betrayed them, he had once been their friend, so he would be given a chance to be saved. PDB hid the truth for money, driven by simple greed. Sung Hoon's plan was to make him reveal the truth, not to kill him. Mr. Kang was also motivated by greed. Years ago, he supplied spoiled food to the VI-1EC5 and L-1E3 Iveen Fuck Loy Welfare Center for profit. The plan was to damage his esophagus so he could never eat again, but Jun Ki unexpectedly killed his daughter instead. Tacho's wrongdoing wasn't as severe. She initially wanted to help them but ultimately stood by idly. The plan was to reveal Yoon Kai's true parentage to her. Afterward, they would confront Kai Eung-cha, who did nothing while watching them being taken away years ago. The severity of each person's crime would determine their punishment. After Jun Ki killed someone, presumably PDB, though the text is ambiguous here, Sung Hoon would find a scapegoat, and a jury trial would be arranged. He would manipulate the selection process to include their targets on the jury. Jun Ki and Chef Lee would also participate, beginning the punishment one by one. Soon after, the media received an anonymous tip. Before his death, PDB had made a deal with the director and Mrs. Na, trying to cover up what happened at VI-1EC5 and L-1E3I. Sung Hoon hoped this news would unsettle the director and Mrs. Na, just like 20 years ago. They had struggled to reach their current positions and were about to lose it all. Mr. Ryu criticized Mrs. Na for her selfishness in concealing the VI-1EC5 and L-1E3I scandal, prioritizing her career. Yoon Kai, upon seeing the news, immediately went to find Sung Jun, telling him that Sung Hoon had given her a document the previous night. It was a petition Sung Hoon had written as a child. Sung Jun was stunned as he read the contents. It turned out that as a child, Sung Hoon had pleaded with Mr. Ryu for help, but he had chosen to ignore him. Meanwhile, Sung Hoon was watching Mr. Ryu and called Sung Jun, telling him to come. Then, during their conversation, Sung Hoon called Sung Jun again so he could overhear it. The statute of limitations had likely expired on the VI-1EC5 and L-1E3I crimes. Sung Hoon just wanted to know the truth. Mr. Ryu revealed that back then, as soon as he received the case, the chief director invited him to a vacation villa. The chief director and the director were waiting for him there. They told him to cover it up. Otherwise, Mrs. Na would also be in trouble because she had paid PDB hush money. At that time, Mr. Ryu was in a dilemma, unable to bring his own wife to court. So, he accepted their offer, and Jun Chung became the price of that deal. In the end, she was abused and killed by men old enough to be her father. Sung Hoon hoped Mr. Ryu would confess and accept punishment, but he had no intention of doing so. Even if he became a demon, he would continue down the path he had chosen. Hearing this, Sung Hoon decided to proceed with his plan. When Sung Jun arrived at the scene, Mr. Ryu had a gun in his hand but couldn't bring himself to pull the trigger. He only shot Sung Hoon in the arm. Sung Jun rushed forward to intervene, heartbrokenly arresting his father for attempted murder, which was precisely Sung Hoon's plan. The crimes of VI-1EC5 and L-1E3I were likely beyond the statute of limitations, so this was the only way to punish Mr. Ryu. Mr. Ryu was arrested, and Sung Jun couldn't escape culpability either, but it was Sung Jun who suffered the most. Such a good family, shattered just like that. At this moment, Yoon Kai revealed something. The chief had ordered PDB's murder, and his mother was also involved. Sung Jun seemed on the verge of collapse. His entire family, except for him, had committed unforgivable crimes. The video was quickly released, and the police checked the chief's call logs. They swiftly found the assassin the chief had hired, one of Moon Kang's men. This time, the chief couldn't escape, and Mrs. Na even less so. Sung Jun, prioritizing justice over family, arrested his own mother. For Sung Hoon's revenge plan, all of them deserved punishment, but Yoon Kai didn't understand why innocent Yoon Na was targeted. The truth was, Sung Hoon didn't want to either. But Jun Ki had spiraled out of his control, becoming a deranged killer, slaughtering innocent people. A month later, Sung Jun worked tirelessly on the front lines, risking his life to catch criminals. Only by keeping busy could he temporarily forget his pain. Meanwhile, Yun Kai was planning something meaningful, to tell everyone the truth about Vision Welfare. He hoped Jun Ki still had one unfinished task, to kill Moon Kang. Moon Kang also wanted to kill him to avenge his daughter. Like two beasts stripped of their humanity, they began a fierce battle in prison. In the end, Moon Kang stabbed Jun Ki to death, but his own throat was also slit by Jun Ki. Ultimately, neither survived. Meanwhile, Chef Li also chose to end his own life. He clutched a photo taken with Jun Ki in prison. Sung Hoon shed tears of regret. His revenge was complete, but his brother and family were gone. Yun Kai's words echoed in his mind. No matter what he had suffered, no matter what had happened, nothing could justify murder. At this point, he wanted to end his life like Chef Li. However, he was discovered and rushed to the hospital in time. Sung Jun visited him. There was something Sung Jun had kept hidden in his heart. He had chosen to become a police officer solely to earn his brother's recognition. Due to a deeply ingrained belief from childhood, he had only considered his brother as family, never suspecting he would be used by him. Soon after, Sung Jun received news that Sung Hoon had applied for a jury trial. His heart pounded. Could it be that his brother's plan wasn't over yet? On the day of the trial, Sung Jun attended. The lawyer held a petition written by Sung Hoon when he was young. It was a detailed account of all the vile acts within Vision Welfare and the complicity of those involved in the case. Sung Hoon's desire for revenge was born out of desperation. The moment Run Chung's dismembered body was unearthed, he had formulated his plan for vengeance. The location of the body had been revealed by the nurse. Now, the nurse testified, disclosing the various abuses within Vision Welfare and the sexual exploitation incidents from 20 years ago. She hadn't spoken up before out of fear. She had even been raped by Moon Kang. Later, for the sake of her daughter, she dared not speak. In reality, Sung Hoon had gone to such extremes only because he felt he had no other choice. If there had been another path, a path towards the light, he certainly wouldn't have chosen this one. Sung Hoon explained that he requested a jury trial not to justify his revenge, nor to seek a reduced sentence. He had only one purpose, to reveal the truth of that year. Regardless of the reason, killing was undeniably wrong. He apologized to the victims caught in the crossfire of his revenge. He didn't ask for forgiveness, only offered his apologies. The jury's verdict was guilty. In the end, the judge sentenced him to life imprisonment. After the trial, Sung Jun felt a sense of relief, hoping his brother could finally escape the darkness of the past. As for Yun Kai, she continued her community welfare activities, helping children in need. Sung Jun suddenly wondered if someone like Yun Kai had been at Vision Welfare back then. Could things have been different?